I'm drawing infinite cards in Marvel. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 226. When Fu Rui, as well as representatives of various forces, rushed to the ballroom of the party, they saw such a peaceful scene. The wide main hall is clean and tidy, as if it has just been cleaned carefully, and the corpses of several terrorists are piled up in the corner like cargo, without any sense of disobedience. The handsome silver-haired young man sat on a chair with his legs crossed, sipping red wine with a glass in his hand. Yu Tong stood quietly behind his chair, waiting for orders at any time. On the chairs on both sides, Tony and Ellie were sitting respectively. They were very preoccupied and didn't know what they were thinking. Several people seemed to be talking about something, but when they saw Fu Rui and others coming in, they stopped talking and Kiki looked up. Fu Rui, long time no see. The silver-haired young man raised his eyes, looked at Fu Rui, who was the leader of the crowd in front of him, nodded slightly, and the corner of his mouth raised an arc quietly. "Yes, Kyle, it's really been a long time." Fury shook his head inside, looking at Kyle sitting in front of him, with a strong sense of unreality. After the farewell, it was more than 60 years later when we met again, and Kyle was as young as a recruit on the day he went to the battlefield, ignoring the torment of the years, and there was no slight change in anti-aging growth. As for Fury, even with the infinite formula potion, the aging of the body is infinitely suppressed, but his physique is still just an ordinary human being, and he is still inevitably aged by about 10 years, and now he looks like he has entered the vicissitudes of middle age. As the representative of the military, Rhodes, and representatives of several other bureaus, listening to the conversation between the two, looking at the familiar Kyle sitting on the main seat, they were even more surprised. Although the higher-ups have already given hints, when they witnessed a legend sitting in front of them alive, and the young face that was exactly the same as that on the highest data file more than 60 years ago, it still broke common sense speechless. "Okay, you can just find a place to sit. There are some things I can answer for you one by one." Kyle glanced at everyone, and calmly sipped his red wine calmly. Without hesitation, Fury walked over and sat on a chair, not forgetting to pick up the wine bottle and pour himself a glass. The representatives of the other bureaus looked at each other, and those who made up their minds sat down in the ballroom seats. The ballroom, which had been attacked by terrorists before, suddenly turned into some kind of important national parliament, solemn and sacred. But the bureaucrats and military officers who were full of power in the past, after taking their seats now, they were silent and did not dare to make a sound. Everyone knows who the protagonist tonight is, no matter who comes, they can't steal his limelight. A little late, isn't it too late? At this moment, with a soft and powerful female voice, a beautiful figure stepped in from the door of the ballroom. The dark red hair was trembling like a rattle. The woman was only wearing a black smooth leather jacket sexily. The devil's figure was fully displayed, the exquisite curves were alluring and sinful, and a pair of proud twin peaks stood tall under the zipper. The new deputy director of S.H.I.E.L.D., Natasha Romanoff. I knew this woman would definitely come. The poisonous Black Widow in the dark, the representatives of the various bureaus whispered in whispers, with a lot of apprehension in their tone. "Sit down quickly." Kyle shook his head secretly. This woman is really a seasoned agent. She just left as a Carter, only walked around outside, and took off her mask to represent the position of S.H.I.E.L.D. Natasha smiled slightly, stepped forward gracefully, and sat down next to the chair where Ellie was. Ellie shrank timidly, and recognized Natasha, the violent woman who almost threw her half to death just now. After everyone was seated and the ballroom fell silent, Kyle said indifferently, "I know, most of you here are here tonight just to find out where I have been these decades, and where have I been? What did you do? Why did you never appear in the public eye again, and now you suddenly appear?" The representatives of each bureau smiled a little embarrassedly. Indeed, they do want to know. Not only them, but people all over New York, the United States, and even the world want to find out the answer to this question. The answer is simple, Kyle said bluntly. In 1945, shortly after the end of World War II, a few months after I resigned from the position of Major General, I left the Earth and went to outer space, and I didn't return until a while ago. What he said was calm, but it was like a nuclear explosion on the ground. Except for Tony and the others, most of the people in the hall were horrified. In the old age of 1945, how could it be possible to leave the Earth for interstellar voyages? Even with advanced technology now, human beings are only at the stage of landing on the moon. But the one who said this was Kyle, the symbol of peace, which in itself represented authority and strength, and his words were unquestionably persuasive. For a while, it was obvious that it was a fantasy, but no one questioned it, but accepted the fact by default. Mr. Kyle, I want to know how you left the Earth and how you returned. Rhodes took a deep breath and asked cautiously, also, what is there in the outer space beyond the Earth? The two questions he asked were the most critical points immediately. Almost everyone in the hall looked at Kyle with vague anticipation. The means for me to leave and return to Earth are not available to ordinary people. Kyle said this, obviously not wanting to reveal the existence of the Rainbow Bridge. He paused, then smiled and said, as for what's beyond the Earth, we see, show them. Kyle snapped his fingers, and the sunglasses hanging on the button of the jacket on his chest immediately glowed with two beams of bright light, presenting a three-dimensional image with a holographic projection. Under the breathless watching of everyone in the hall, in the stereoscopic image, the local alien-style high-rise buildings of Saka, various strange and powerful alien race creatures, interstellar spaceships driving without noise at low altitude. There is an interstellar stadium that is half the size of a city, the barren wilderness full of biological bone remains on the ancient battlefield, the huge six-winged black dragon creature like a mountain, and finally the city of Asgard built of gold in the sky. The movie ended in less than half a minute, and most of the people in the hall were in a trance, keeping their mouths wide open in surprise, and they would not be able to recover for a while. I just set foot in a corner of outer space by accident. Just 2 or 3 places. Kyle smiled lightly, and told the unacceptable facts coldly. As far as I know, there are galaxies outside the Earth and the Milky Way alone. There are countless planets with life. Alien creatures, some of which resemble human beings, are far more advanced in technology and civilization than us. Some non-human organisms are naturally better at fighting and killing than us in terms of physical strength. Everyone may wish to think about it. What should we do if one day aliens invade the Earth? Kyle shrugged and asked a meaningful question. Hearing this question, most of the people present felt their scalps go numb and gasped. Fear sprouted from the bottom of their hearts, permeating every inch of their skin. So, my return is not the point. Kyle stood up, looked down at the people in the hall indifferently, and said in a cold voice, everyone, I just want to remind you that the Earth will usher in a new era that will subvert all previous cognitions. The greatest enemy of mankind in the future will come from outside the Earth. Chapter 227 New Era. There are living planets outside the Earth, and aliens are far more powerful than humans. This sounds like sensationalism, but it can be said by Kyle, the symbol of peace, that it is undoubtedly a highly credible truth. After Kyle answered the first few questions, the representatives of each bureau were already pale and fidgeting in fear. They really wanted to leave immediately, return to the departments in the bureau, and convene a plenary meeting for discussion. As if seeing their thoughts, Kyle spread his hands and said, that's all for tonight. I should go back and rest. Mr. Kyle, you must come to the CIA when you are free. We must treat you with the highest courtesy. The representative of the CIA stood up quickly and said with a flattering expression. The FBI is also welcome. Mr. Kyle is welcome to come and guide you. The representative of the FBI did his part and followed up. Our military. Rhodes opened his mouth, but before he could speak, he was interrupted by Natasha the next moment. Okay, don't go too far, Natasha snorted coldly, and said bluntly, don't forget, Mr. Kyle is the chief consultant of our shield to convey. Representatives of various forces were speechless. Kyle, the symbol of peace, had a vacant position as a general consultant in the newly built shield bureau more than, years ago. This is still a fact recorded in the file. When you leave, take away the terrorist who is still alive, and send someone to clean up the venue, Kyle said. We will investigate this matter as soon as possible. I will give you an explanation. Dare to do something to the peace symbol. I think the people behind it are tired of their jobs. Several representatives agreed without hesitation, and their malicious eyes focused on the man tied to the chair. The terrorist leader was still in a coma, but suddenly felt a shiver. If he knew that he was being targeted by several high-level departments at the same time, he would definitely have nothing to love, and would rather have his neck broken earlier. After the representatives of various departments left, Ellie couldn't help but wanted to return to the news company. Kyle looked at her and reminded him with a deep meaning, You should be very clear about what can be published in the newspaper and what can't be made public, so I won't go into details. I understand. Ellie nodded like a chick pecking at rice. She knew very well in her heart that, for example, the return of the symbol of peace, the existence of planets with life beyond the Earth, and the new era of alien wars, these can be published in the newspapers, but it is best to keep these things in her heart about the mysterious forces that Kata belongs to. After Ellie left, Kyle's eyes fell on Tony, who was still in a daze, and said peacefully, "Tony, you also know just now that there are many planets with life outside the Earth. Your father, Howard, has a high probability of surviving on a certain planet, on the living planet. In the future, I will definitely step into outer space again and find them back. If you also have the heart, then give me a good arm and strengthen myself, at least have enough self-protection ability." There was something in Kyle's words, which hit Tony's heart directly. Clenching his fists, Tony stood up from his seat, looked directly at Kyle, and said in a little confusion, "Godfather, I don't know whether what I will do in the future is correct in the eyes of others." "Why do you need to look at what others think?" Kyle smiled, raised his left hand, and tapped his 2 fingers on the steel core on Tony's chest. "Boldly do it, no matter what is right or wrong in the world, as long as it is what you think is right, things will be fine. In addition, only the strong will have a choice in the future, and the weak will have no choice." "I see." Tony nodded, his eyes became firmer. "Godfather, I still have things to do, so I'm leaving first. Go." Kyle patted him on the shoulder, and Tony immediately stepped out of the ballroom without looking back. Looking at his back, Kyle vaguely saw a shadow of Howard. The will-like scrap iron will eventually be forged into unyielding steel. "Iron Man, it's done," Kyle whispered to himself, turned around, and at this time Fury and Natasha were approaching. Fury looked at him in surprise, and asked curiously, "Kyle, why did you say something about aliens? Once the news spreads, I am afraid that the whole world will be a sensation tomorrow, causing panic and social unrest, because it's a fact." Kyle chuckled. "Only an ostrich will face the imminent danger, and will willingly bury its head under the sand, deceiving itself. I am not an ostrich." He paused, and continued, "Instead of letting the world, after the alien war, experience despair and pain before learning the lesson, it is better for me to break the cognition of the world's outdated framework and let them have early on guard and vigilance." Both Fury and Natasha nodded, half understood, and looked at the man in front of them with more respect and admiration. If it is said that Kyle was the eagle in the sky in the past, flying out of the bondage of the well of the earth, looking down from the sky at the stars and the sea, now, Kyle is like a flying dragon flying freely in the sky, grabbing the ground at will, breaking the wellhead, allowing people in the well to see the morning stars and the corner of the sea in advance. The next morning, tens of thousands of people in the bustling city, according to the boring rules, went out early in formal clothes, bought a breakfast on the side of the road, and went to the newsagent to buy a newspaper along the way. But when people came to the newspaper store, they unexpectedly found that many office workers gathered around the door of the store, and 3 or 4 people were reading a newspaper seriously. "Boss, bring me a copy of the New York Times." As a member of thousands of office workers, Scott Lang held a briefcase and shouted into the newspaper shop as usual. "The New York Times? No more, 1,000 copies, just sold out," replied the boss. "Sold out?" Scott was taken aback. "I don't know yet, something big happened. Today's New York Times is almost sold out everywhere," the boss sighed, and the newspaper was sold out. Not only was he not at all happy, but his face was heavy. "What's going on?" Scott asked in amazement, approaching a young man holding a New York Times next to him, and when his eyes fell on the newspaper page, his heart trembled. Peace symbolizes the return of Kyle, in his prime, young as yesterday. This is just a small headline, shocking enough, but more shocking news headlines are yet to come. The first man in the history of the Earth to step out of the Earth and go to the stars. The extraterrestrial speech of the symbol of peace. There are advanced alien creatures beyond the Earth. The legendary hero bluntly said that the future powerful enemy of mankind comes from the outer space of the Earth. Every title is blackened and bolded, shocking and stimulating people's eyes. "My God, what's going on?" Scott opened his eyes wide, wishing he could grab the New York Times and read it carefully. The New York Times, being an authority in the news industry, naturally wouldn't send out any fictitious news. If the news above is true, the times are about to change, Scott gasped and said in shock. Chapter 228: The Era of Heroes. Kyle, the symbol of peace, disappeared from the public eye for 63 years. He actually left the Earth and went to outer space for a circle. He returned to personally verify the existence of alien advanced races, and directly proposed that the future enemies of human beings on Earth come from aliens. This news report can no longer be described as a headline, but it is the most important news that has shocked people all over the world since the seemingly peaceful 21st century. Early in the morning, in New York, the economic city of the United States, people began to scramble to buy a copy of the New York Times. In the past, office workers who were in a hurry to go to work actually read newspapers in groups in the streets and alleys. The more they read, the more shocked and worried they became because the New York Times is not a headline party, it deliberately attracts an uproar, and the newspaper's well-founded text reports are even more thought-provoking. This morning, more than 80.00% of the people in New York were late for work. Even if they went to the company in a daze, they were discussing the alien remarks in the newspaper with their colleagues worriedly. After the morning, when this important news spread rapidly from the internet media outside of New York, and even outside of the Americas, it was like a catastrophic nuclear storm sweeping across the entire world, causing a global sensation. The return of Kyle, the symbol of peace, is naturally worthy of heated discussion and attention by people all over the world, but the alien intelligence information he brought back is really shocking to the human beings on Earth. Symbol of peace, alien technology, alien invasion, future crisis. In just half a day, this kind of panic-inducing topic suddenly became the focus of heated discussions around the world. Countless famous scientists and experts stood up and expressed their opinions and remarks, some opposed and some supported. Some suggest establishing friendly relations with alien races in advance, some suggest that countries establish a plan to deal with alien invasion as soon as possible, and some regard it as a fallacy, claiming that it is best to bring the person responsible for the rumors to interrogation. Regarding the last point, the general public yelled angrily, "Bricks without brains, you know, it is Kyle, the symbol of peace, who made and confirmed the extraterrestrial statement." Go back and look through the history books. As early as in the darkest and chaotic period of World War II, he once forced risen kingdom to surrender like a god, and monopolized a series of titles representing strength and cruelty, such as the devil-killing gods and tyrants. Symbol, heroes invincible. Want to arrest Kyle for interrogation, out of your mind? The mass media and scientific organizations in various countries, of course, did not dare to trouble Kyle. They contacted American congressmen and the military very interestingly, and used various methods to find out the views of the top American officials on this matter. Soon, they got inside information. The agencies of various bureaus in the United States held an urgent high-level meeting late last night, and the discussion continued until the next morning. Now most of the personnel are still lying at home and have not woken up. As for the extraterrestrial remarks, the U.S. agencies and even the president responded very delicately, and their attitudes remained pertinent, neither accepting them as facts nor clarifying them as fallacies. In fact, the high-level U.S. side really wants to suppress these remarks, so as to prevent the national panic from causing economic depression and rising crime rates. But the problem is that it is Kyle who made the extraterrestrial remarks, the only person that the United States cannot control, and if there is an alien invasion in the future, they who suppress the alien remarks now will really be nailed to the pillar of history sooner. With Kyle's deliberate promotion, the wheel of the times has begun to turn. No one dares to stop it. The only way to do it is to accept it and come up with countermeasures. The silence of the United States indirectly acquiesced in this extraterrestrial remarks. All of a sudden, no one in the global media openly questioned it, and began to seriously report the relevant news, and started a long-term focused discussion with the whole people. Knowing that the sky is about to change, it is necessary to prepare the light source and umbrella of the response plan. And Kyle, the symbol of peace, can be the light that shines through the darkness, but where is the protective umbrella of the earth? At the time when the whole world was panicking and discussing, a shining Iron Man with a golden red eye appeared out of the sky. Only less than half a day. Armed with a supersonic flight engine and laser cannons, Iron Man flew from the United States across the vast sea to the Middle East, and successively defeated terrorists with sufficient ammunition in various places in the Middle East, and rescued the local civilians. Iron Man's steel battle armor not only ignores bullets, but even tanks and missiles can't stop him. He crushes and sweeps all kinds of high-tech armed forces all the way. While controlling violence with violence, it also ensures a frighteningly high rescue survival rate. The local people kindly gave it the heroic title of Iron Man. The appearance of Iron Man at the turning point of this era is like an effective booster, penetrating the hearts of the people who are terrified by alien speech. The birth of Iron Man made the general public understand one thing clearly. Kyle, the symbol of peace, is the only legendary hero recognized by the world at present. Because of this, it is not enough more capable people must stand up and become heroes to withstand future disasters and pressures. This year is 2008. The future should never be a dark era that represents despair and doom, but should be a heroic era that belongs to light and hope. Few people know. After Iron Man completed his heroic feat in the Middle East, on his way back to the United States, he was detected by the U.S. Air Defense Detection Network over the territory. Thinking it was an unidentified aircraft, Colonel Rhodes, as the commander of the military base, dispatched 2 F-12 fighters to intercept and search after the fighter planes fought with Iron Man in the air. One of the fighter planes unfortunately suffered damage to its wing and fell down. Taking this opportunity, Colonel Rhodes was shocked to learn the true identity of Iron Man, and had to cover up the encounter with a military drill accident on the other hand. In the secret interrogation room of the CIA in New York, a tall silver-white steel machine broke into it, brutally shot and killed more than a dozen interrogators, and finally killed the leading criminal who attacked the peace symbol last night. Under the siege of military personnel, the steel machine blasted through the wall forcefully, and flew towards the sky at high speed. The advent of Iron Man, as well as the appearance of steel machines, advanced high-tech devices far beyond the common understanding, are like the second shot fired into the sky, following the alien speech to break the outdated framework, and to change the understanding of human beings on the Earth to science and technology, raised to a whole new level. At the same time, deep in the Atlantic Ocean, the exclusive island of the Carl family is disguised as a huge ice floe. The third floor of the base's main building, the fortress here is the highest meeting hall of the family. Since 63 years, no one has the right to open it. Today, the long-lost highest meeting of the family is finally ushered in. The hall is brightly lit and spacious enough to accommodate 100 people to attend a meeting. An oval metal table is placed in the center of the hall, surrounded by hundreds of chairs. At this moment, the meeting chairs are almost full of a group of people of different ages. Chapter 229 Carl Family Supreme Meeting. Among the hundreds of people sitting in the conference hall, most of them are American, and there are also a few Asians, and the gender tends to be even. Among them, the oldest one is nearly 60 years old, with white temples and wrinkled or scarred face. The youngest is only about 14 years old, and she is just a lolly, with an immature face and figure full of immaturity. Some of them wore a full suit, some leather jackets, some simple casual clothes, and some wore exotic and luxurious robes. After receiving the message from the highest meeting of the Carl family, most of the cadets living all over the world immediately returned to the island base from the nearest space teleportation portal within 12 hours. At this time, all the 3 generations of Card disciples cultivated in more than 60 years returned to the conference hall on the 3rd floor, and not even one person was absent. They looked tense and serious, sitting upright on chairs one by one, suppressing their excitement and waiting quietly. 3 generations of Carters, except for a small number of black rank elites in each generation, they can freely return to the family base and enjoy the benefits of an unlimited formula reagent every year. Most of the rest of the Carters will leave the family base after the deadline is fulfilled. With abilities and knowledge far beyond ordinary people, they are the elite of the elite no matter where they go. Some created dependent families, some became the heads of mercenary regiments, high-level Carters of big countries, and those with better opportunities even became nobles and royal families in some countries. As long as the right way is used, the money and valuable items obtained by the Carters when going out can be exchanged for family contribution points, which can be exchanged for infinite formula potions, advanced equipment, and biological cards at the base. Under such a virtuous circle, the Carl family has been growing secretly every year. From 1945 to today, even the Carters in the Carl family may not know how big the main family's industry and influence are. The background of the Carl family itself has grown infinitely like a snowball, and because of this, the betrayal of one Carter may usher in the pursuit of all other Carters, which has led to no precedent of Carter betrayal so far. In addition, since the first generation of card players were all cards with abilities given by Kyle, they have long been regarded as gods, let alone the rest of the second and third generations of Carters, even if they have never met the head of the family, Kyle, have been admonished and taught by the first generation of Carters since they were young. and their loyalty to the Carl family and family Kyle has been deeply rooted. Tread. The sound of footsteps came from outside the door, and immediately hundreds of carters straightened their backs, and their scorching gazes all fell on the door. I saw a silver-haired young man in a black windbreaker walking indifferently into the hall. Yutong followed closely behind, and the two of them slowly came to the front seat of the round table under the focus of many eyes. There are 5 chairs there, a main seat exclusive to the patriarch, and 4 secondary seats on the left and right sides. The silver-haired young man sat directly on the main seat, and Yutong sat next to him on the right-hand side seat. As soon as the two of them took their seats, hundreds of card disciples stood up in unison and greeted in unison, "Hello, Patriarch." "Hello, Supervisor, sit down." Kyle raised his hands and pressed down slightly, and the caddis immediately sat down in response. Looking around, Kyle looked at the rest of the full seats, leaving only 3 vacant vice seats on his left and right sides, and sighed softly in his heart. Forget about Howard and Logan. Unexpectedly, even Lucy also boarded the interstellar spacecraft. The 3 of them left the Earth together in a group and searched for him in outer space. Now, more than 20 years have passed, Kyle has returned, and the 3 of them have disappeared. An inventor, a Wolverine, and a girl protected by an elf. This combination is quite amazing. Kyle sighed inwardly, his frowning brows quickly opened again. In this way, the combined combat power of the 3 is definitely not bad. In the human world and universe, as long as the luck is not bad and enters some dead planets, there is still a high probability of survival. You can ask Heimdall to help you find this matter. Kyle quickly thought of a countermeasure, calmed down, glanced at the hundreds of carters in front of him, and said with a chuckle, "Call all of you carters and hold the highest meeting of the family, mainly to tell you exactly one thing, I'm back." Kyle's words were very plain, but they contained an unspeakable power, which made the hearts of hundreds of caddis in the hall tremble slightly, and some old first-generation caddis had tears in their eyes. No matter what size the Carl family has grown to, even if a few core members leave, it can continue to maintain its strength, but without a patriarch, it is like having no soul all the time, immersed in development but unable to find a future purpose. The return of Kyle can be said to be the switch to launch the aircraft carrier of the Carl family. Only he can order all the Kata members and make Kata willingly work hard. There is one more thing, which is also very important. Kyle tapped his fingers on the table and made a decision. The Carl family has been hiding for more than half a century. Now that the times have changed, it is time to bring some forces to the surface. As soon as these words came out, all the carters suddenly opened their eyes wide, showing eagerness and anticipation. They waited for this sentence, and they also waited too long. The carters of the Carl family, whether they are in the base or go out to build their own forces, are not allowed to reveal their identity as carters to the outside world. A small number of people in the world know Katu, and they only think it is the code name of a professional killer of Zero organization. They never know that Katu is a member of the Carl family. No one knows what the Katu means, and what the Carl family really means. The family's island base is still the same. I will buy another building in New York, as the gateway for the Carl family to transfer to the outside world, and let some carters settle in it. Kyle pondered, looking at the carters, and said in a deep voice, "As for your identity as card disciples, you don't have to hide it from the outside world, but remember, don't use your identity as a carter to do some dirty and evil things, or don't blame me for cleaning up the portal." When Kyle said the last sentence, his golden pupils flickered, and a faint golden flame ignited on his body surface. The oppressive aura of Vulcan swept the audience, and the indoor temperature of the entire hall rose several degrees Celsius. The caddis are not ordinary people, and their senses are very keen. Now looking at Kyle, who is exuding the aura of the gods, it seems to be facing a dragon with its fangs open. The gap in combat power that cannot be resisted makes people feel deeply powerless. Sense. Drenched in cold sweat, they nodded subconsciously. This is the patriarch, so strong, terribly strong, the degree of evolution is far above them. The highest meeting of the Carl family ended briefly, until the carters dispersed one after another, and the conference hall on the 3rd floor became deserted. Kyle, who is on the main seat, looked sideways at Yutong, who remains noble and cool, and said with emotion, "Yutong, thank you for your hard work." The departure of Howard, Logan, and Lucy almost put the burden of the Carl family on Yutong's shoulders. No wonder Yutong will become the Black Queen who stands tall today. It is difficult for one person to supervise and control the internal and external forces of the family. After more than 20 years, It is difficult not to become the Black Queen. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 230, Lord God in Krypton Gold. Who made you my boss? The beautiful ember-like eyes stared at Kyle, and his shadow was reflected in the water. Yutong smiled slightly. Her tone was tender and charming, and her cold and frosty face seemed to be frozen, showing all kinds of amorous demeanor. Back then, Lolita not only grew up to be a beauty queen, but also teased people. An inexplicable heat surged up in his body, and Kyle looked away without leaving a trace, not daring to look too much. The fire spirit of Vulcan was already very strong. The root of this fire lies in the genetic level of physique, which is reflected in all aspects of body, divine power and soul. By the way, boss, I want to show you something. Yutong smiled charmingly, and stepped forward. A pair of white slender hands wrapped around Kyle's left arm, grabbed him and walked downstairs of the base fortress. Go. That? Yutong, you have really grown up a lot. He keenly felt that his elbows were trapped in a massive subtle warm softness. Even with Kyle's indifferent temperament, he was a little embarrassed at this moment, and he passively led him downstairs. Isn't it good to grow up? It's just that I can't sit on the boss's shoulders like before. Yutong stuck out her pink tongue, and her eyes were clear and clear. Although she is already a powerful and mature Black Queen, in front of Kyle, it seems that she is still the same simple and direct little girl as before. Kyle smiled helplessly, and the mood that had been a little turbulent just now calmed down and dissipated. Yutong hugged his arm and walked together to the elevator of the base fortress. Lord God. We are going to the third basement floor, the technology production factory. The two walked into the elevator. Yutong ordered to the round camera on the corner. A response came from the elevator's loudspeaker immediately, with a gentle voice similar to Jarvis, respectfully said, "Okay, supervisor." After speaking, the elevator started and descended smoothly to the bottom floor. Kyle watched this scene, smiling wryly again and again. The title of Lord God stunned him once again. Jarvis became the only artificial intelligence on Earth when the three of Howard left more than, years ago. Before Howard left, he split the original system program into two. The blank half of the family information was originally named Jarvis and became the personal butler of his son Tony, keeping half of the Carl family's archives. He was responsible for handling all the family's affairs, and took a new name of Lord God. It's true that the Lord God is the housekeeper of the family. Kyle didn't know where to spit out this slot. The elevator went straight down, passing through the exercise gravity room and the high-tech scientific research room, and arrived at the three basement floors that were newly built in the past few decades. Crack, click, click. Trivial and dense sounds came into the ears. Kyle and Yutong stepped out of the elevator and stepped into the third basement floor. The internal lights automatically turned on, and all kinds of technological equipment with complex structures came into view. The tiny circuit pipes crisscrossed like an ant's nest. This is like an underground secret factory. All kinds of equipment are programmed according to the system, cooperate to automatically produce certain things, and they are running day and night without interruption. What is this making? Kyle asked subconsciously with his pupils constricted. Just follow me. Yutong chuckled, hugged his arm tightly, and led Kyle to the deepest part of the three-story underground factory, and stopped when he reached a steel wall. Lord God, open the safe room of the factory. Following Yutong's order, the steel wall suddenly vibrated violently, and then automatically rose like a rolling door, revealing the dark room behind the wall. This is... Kyle opened his eyes wide, and the dazzling white and blue beams shot out from the safe room, overwhelming the entire field of vision. It was a round core-shaped object with its own light source, each of which was contained in a square glass box, arranged neatly in rows and rows, filling the entire dark room. It turned out to be Krypton gold. The shock in Kyle's heart cannot be described in words. The Krypton gold piled up like a hill. Even if you look at the whole universe, this is a nearly priceless wealth. You know, on Sokka, only one Krypton gold is enough to buy several small interstellar spacecraft. Yutong said slowly, after 15 years since you left the Earth, Howard built this underground production factory mainly using vibration gold ore materials. Half a century has passed, and until yesterday, the Krypton gold products produced have accumulated reached about, 10,000 Krypton gold. The corner of Kyle's mouth twitched. Krypton Gold not only needs to have a production device, but also needs to invest a lot of energy. In other words, if you draw a blue card alone, you can draw 1,000 times. However, drawing cards with Krypton Gold is too extravagant. Krypton Gold is the ultimate energy source of the steel armor, and it is also the most indispensable core component of the entire steel armor. If in the future, a complete remote control system and a Mark-type steel suit that can be assembled automatically are obtained, this, Krypton Gold can create an invincible mechanical army to rule the Earth. No, it should be said that the soldiers who will fight against future alien invasions are nothing at all. It's a great help, Yutong. It seems that the family heritage has accumulated very deep in these years. Kyle sighed, instinctively raised his hand, and put it on Yutong's black and beautiful hair as a sign of encouragement. I touched it. Yutong didn't resist either. Her eyes narrowed into crescent moons, and a beautiful smile appeared on the corner of her delicate mouth. By the way, seeing this Krypton Gold reminds me of one thing. Kyle withdrew his palm, thought for a while, and said with a calm smile, Yutong, come with me, of course. No matter where you go, please let Yutong accompany you, Yutong said without hesitation, with bright silver light shining in his eyes. United States, New York, Stark Industries office building. After an eventful day, it finally fell into the night, and the office skyscrapers were brightly lit. In the acting chairman's office, Steny frowned on the office chair. The desk was covered with various newspapers. On the glowing computer screen, there were Iron Man and Iron Machine respectively, with positive and negative news reports. That bastard really couldn't hold himself back and started to do it. Steny snorted coldly, and looked at the computer screen annoyedly. The news report about Iron Man's complete extermination of terrorists in the Middle East. On the slightly blurred picture of the news report, Iron Man is crawling out of the shell pit. The surface of the steel shell with the gold and red dye is full of scars, and the empty eyes on the steel mask are staring directly at the camera. The journalist's comments were naturally full of praise, saying that Iron Man is another new light of the century after Kyle, the symbol of peace. The report on the steel machine is full of abuse and condemnation, as well as the most wanted warrants from various bureaus and the military. Stanislav was upset, and turned off the computer screen. At this moment, the door of the office suddenly opened, and the charming blonde secretary rushed in with a panicked expression. What are you doing? You're in such a panic, won't you knock on the door? Seeing this, Stanislav could not help roaring, and slammed a pair of big palms on the table, sending many newspapers flying away. Chairman, a guest is here. The female secretary stood firm against the wall and replied in horror. Who? I don't have an appointment tonight, Stanislav frowned. As soon as he stood up from his seat, he saw two people walking in one after the other outside the door. The former is a silver-haired young man in a black trench coat, and the latter is a charming black-haired beauty. The two look calm and composed, as if they are familiar with each other and regard this building as their own home. You are. It was as if Stanislav had seen the most terrifying thing. His face paled instantly, and he was 10 times more terrified than the female secretary. His feet went limp, and he sat back on the chair. Chapter 231 Stark Major Shareholder. In the chairman's office. Kyle glanced at the female secretary indifferently, and the female secretary seemed to understand immediately, walked out of the room quickly with interest, and closed the door behind her. The office with the door closed seemed to be a prison. Stanislav, who was sitting on the office chair, leaned limply on the armchair, and could not hide his dread and trepidation. Mr. Kyle raised a finger, shook it lightly, and reminded him coldly, Obadiah Stane, here in Stark Industries. You shouldn't call me that. Stanislav was slightly taken aback, and soon came to his senses, wet the lining of his suit with cold sweat, wiped the sweat from his forehead, lowered his posture and said awkwardly, I know, the controlling shareholder, that's right, it is the controlling shareholder, the largest and oldest shareholder of Stark Industries, who owns 80.00% of the shares of Stark Industries. What does 85 shares mean? Means full control over the industry. A word can directly change the future development direction of the industry. How does it feel to face your superiors? Kyle chuckled, stepped forward, walked to the guest chair in front of the desk and sat down. Crossing his legs, Yutong walked behind her and leaned against it quietly as a beautiful background. Very good. Stanley forced a smile, which was uglier than crying. Previously, he partnered with the rest of the shareholders, owning 5.00% of the shares, and to some extent suppressed Tony, who held, percent of the shares. Now, Kyle seems to want to get back to place, and he came as a major shareholder, which made him lose his temper at all. As a major shareholder, I have something to announce, Kyle said softly. What's the matter? Stannis had a bad premonition in his heart, took a few deep breaths, and looked at Kyle nearby in a panic. That is. From now on, you will be dismissed from the position of president of Stark Industries and will never be hired, Kyle said it lightly, a sentence that pronounced the death sentence of Stanislav's career. What did you say? Stanislav was completely stunned, and smiled forcedly, thinking for a moment that he had heard it wrong. You're fired. Do you want me to repeat that? Kyle looked at him like an idiot. Stannis shuddered all over, stood up with all his strength, put his hands on the table, stared at Kyle with wide eyes, and said hoarsely, How can you do this? I'm the controlling shareholder, why can't I do this? Kyle asked back, Don't you like playing tricks? In this regard, he is really an ancestor. Stanley suddenly remembered that a few days ago, because he was backed by other shareholders, he used this to threaten Tony. The small one was hit, and the big one came out. And the origin of this big thing is too outrageous. Dealing with a character like him is completely anti-aircraft guns hitting mosquitoes. I have been in Stark Industries for decades, and I have worked hard without any credit. You just fired me with one sentence. Stannis panting, eyes congested and bloodshot. If Howard was here, he would never. You still have the face to talk about Howard, Kyle interrupted him, and said coldly, If it wasn't for Howard's face, do you think you can still live safely now? Stannis choked immediately, his 5 fingers clenched into fists, staring at Kyle, daring to speak angrily. I'm fine now, and I'm reasoning with you. I fired you, and you should be dissatisfied, Kyle spread his hands and said. If you want to solve it through law or force, it's up to you. Stanley smiled. Law. The other party has an absolute controlling stake, and indeed, with one sentence, he, the president, can be dismissed as if he were an employee force. The opponent is known as the strongest hero. How can he fight against him? By the way, depending on that, maybe, Stanley thought to himself, rolling his eyes, wondering what he was thinking. He said in a deep voice, That's good. You don't need to fire me. I can fire myself now, but please let me pack my things. This is not acceptable. Kyle smiled and said calmly, Everything in this office belongs to Stark Industries. The only thing you can take away is your suit jacket. Don't go too far. Stanley was in a hurry, but when he saw the silver light in the eyes of Yutong behind Kyle, he immediately felt a creepy feeling in his heart, and his arrogance couldn't help but slump. Let's go. In the end, Stanislav could only say this, took out his employee card and threw it on the table, picked up the suit jacket on the back chair, opened the office door and left in a little embarrassment. After he walked away, Yutong said coldly, Boss, that old guy just now had the thought of killing you 3 times. If you hadn't asked me to save his life before, I would have given him up from the top floor a long time ago. Throw it down. So, the steel machine that attacked the CIA was really him? Kyle asked, rubbing his chin. That's right. Yutong nodded lightly and waved towards the void. The drawer of the desk opened automatically, and a dilapidated round cord device with a dim light source floated out of it. Looking at the objects floating in front of his eyes, Kyle smiled and said, Unexpectedly, he took advantage of Tony's trip to the Middle East and stole the old energy core that Tony's home replaced. I resigned him. He must have resentment, and wanted to activate the steel machine to take revenge. But now that the old core is in my hands, the only exposed new energy core is Tony's chest. Kyle analyzed this and came to a conclusion. So, the old guy went to Tony's house right away. Boss, it's absolutely correct. Yutong smiled slightly. Under her ability, the thinking of an ordinary person like Stanislav was completely displayed. It's about the same as I expected. The game is set up, just guide him to move forward step by step. Kyle shrugged. To him, Stanislav was as weak as an ant, and he could easily crush him to the ground. As for now, Stanislav is still useful. He can do his best to shine, turn into an experienced boss monster, and level up his nephew. A smooth sailing ability user is not called a hero. He must stand on his own, have enough tenacity, and the most important thing is to stand up again after a fall, learn lessons and turn them into motivation. Since you are a godfather, you must have the responsibility of a godfather. Kyle doesn't mind, and within the controllable range, he makes troubles and trains the new hero Iron Man. Yutong. It's time to go. Change to another venue. Kyle snapped his fingers and walked to the balcony of the office, The height of the 68th floor, the night wind outside blowing his silver hair caressing his forehead. Spreading a pair of dark wings behind his back, Kyle jumped up and stepped on the balcony railing, jumped up, the wings patted a gust of wind, and flew to the night sky of the bustling buildings outside. Yutong's eyes glowed with silver pupils. And her black hair flew up. The whole person was suspended under the package of extraordinary thoughts, and a faint silver light appeared on the body surface. He flew out of the balcony out of thin air, and followed closely behind Kyle. Chapter 232 Heart of Steel. The duplex villa of Tony's family in the heart of New York. Pepper, please, in the administrative folder of Stanislav's office computer, there must be a list of secret deals about Stark's various weapons. I need you to take it out, Tony. What would you do if I found the list? Of course, according to the list, let me destroy all those weapons. Sorry, I won't help you even if I resign. Tony, who is dressed in home casual clothes, and Pepper, who is always in a professional suit and skirt, were discussing matters in the lobby on the first floor. Pepper directly rejected Tony's request, and after speaking the last sentence, he was about to turn around and leave the door. Tony looked directly at the back of Pepper who was about to leave, and said loudly sincerely, Pepper, when I made a fortune, you stood by my side and helped me. Now I want to help those who are injured because of me, but you want to go away from me. This sentence deeply touched Pepper, prompting her to stop, turn around and look into Tony's eyes, and said in a deep voice, Tony, you know that I am willing to do anything for you, but this thing will kill you. I will help you, which is equivalent to pushing you into a dangerous situation. Tony's face is as calm as before. After experiencing some things in his 30s, he now looks more and more mature. He sat silently on the leather sofa, smiled and said, if it weren't for this belief, I would have lived in the slums back then. I'm already dead. He looked at Pepper with steely and determined eyes. At this moment, Pepper suddenly understood that he could no longer dissuade the man in front of him. Pepper was stunned, and said with sincere emotion, Tony, ever since you met Godfather Kyle, it seems that you have transformed and become another person. Godfather. He made me understand my own mission, Tony said with a calm face and firmness, as he said, you don't need to care about other people's opinions, as long as you firmly believe that what you are doing is right, that's enough already. Pepper seemed to be convinced, sighed slightly, and stepped forward to pick up the storage device and permission card on the table. After a while, a commercial vehicle drove out of the villa and headed for the Stark Industrial Building. At the same time, a sports car passed by in the opposite direction and quietly arrived at the entrance of the villa. In the lobby of the duplex villa, Tony picked up the cup and took a sip of water, stood up from the sofa, and was about to go to the basement. At this moment, a big hand suddenly stretched out from behind, and stuck a small syringe into his neck. Tony's face quickly turned pale, and he collapsed on the sofa in a slight convulsion. The glass fell to the ground and shattered crisply into a pile of glass shards. Although his whole body was paralyzed and unable to move, Tony still maintained a clear consciousness. In his vision, an extremely familiar old and distorted face appeared. Tony, I didn't expect that. You are still careless. You gave me the right to freely enter and exit your villa before. Stanislav walked up to Tony with a cold tone, and he took a screwdriver in his hand, ready to take out the energy cord device in his chest. Tony stared at him with wide bloodshot eyes, revealing puzzlement and shock. Tony. Back then I cooperated with the terrorists. When I issued a hunting order against you, I specifically advised them to save your life, so as not to kill a golden chicken that can lay golden eggs. Stannis' expression became slightly ferocious, with angrily said in a cold voice, but now, it is your godfather who forced me. A simple sentence will kick me away who has devoted decades of hard work to Stark Industries. What a symbol of peace, what a legendary hero. Tonight, I will crush him to death like a cat or dog. Of course, this needs the help of the steel suit you created. Pull out the energy core from Tony's chest. Losing the energy core, Tony seemed to have lost his heart, and his face became even more pale and ugly. The shrapnel in his body began to continuously hurt internal organs due to the lack of continuous suppression of energy. Tony. I wish you a peaceful journey. I will send your godfather to heaven as soon as possible, so that you can be a companion. Stanislav smiled, picked up the energy core that glowed with dazzling daylight, and patted Tony's face. Without stopping, he quickly left the villa. He wants to use this new energy core to activate the modified mark, steel armor, and return to the Stark Industries office building to find Kyle for revenge. After Stanislav left for a while, Tony on the sofa coughed violently. Most of the temporary paralysis had been relieved, but the injury from the broken shrapnel earlier made him a terminally ill patient. "Am I going to die?" Tony smiled wryly, gasped weakly, and sat slumped down on the cold floor. The old core was stolen early in the day, and the only new core at the moment was taken away, and to create another core, even if there is time, the body does not have too much strength. Without energy cores, you can only wait for death slowly. "I'm not reconciled." The hall was silent at night. Tony's body was losing strength and vitality, stepping towards the threshold of death bit by bit. Several warm faces kept flashing in his mind. Father Howard, Godfather Kyle, housekeeper Jarvis, and even girlfriend Pepper. By the way, it seems that there is no time to confess in the future. His whole body was cold, Tony's breathing was weak, and his eyelids were as heavy as lead and were about to close. Steady footsteps sounded subtly from the silent hall. Tony struggled to open the slits of his eyes, and saw a tall black figure walking towards him slowly. "Godfather? Is it you?" "No, this should be a hallucination before death," Tony said to himself with difficulty. Then, the figure stopped in front of him, squatted down slightly, and asked him, "Tony, are you just giving up like this?" "Godfather, I have no choice." "You are right, only the strong can choose, the weak have no choice." Tony moved his lips weakly, and replied helplessly. "Of course you are still weak now, but you have the potential to become a strong man. Before you become a hero comparable to the gods, with me as your godfather, it is difficult for you to die." Kyle shrugged, his calm tone full of confidence. He reached into the windbreaker pocket and took out an old energy core that glowed faintly. Seeing the old nucleus representing the hope of life, Tony suddenly opened his eyes wide, his eyes glowing with radiance, and his body was re-infused with strength. His confused brain was completely awake. "Godfather, is it really you?" Tony looked at Kyle squatting in front of him, full of disbelief and excitement. "Who else but me?" Kyle smiled, put the old core in his hand into Tony's chest, and said encouragingly, "Go. Let that guy see how powerful you are, you Iron Man. In the future, we must try our best to keep up with me. Our future enemies will be more than 1,000 times stronger than a small character like Stanislav. There was once a man who fought side by side with him, but in the middle of the war, the pilot who flew the plane first fell into the sea and disappeared." Today, Kyle once again placed this expectation on Iron Man Tony. Chapter 233. Stark Industries, Office Building. When Pepper nervously came to the door of the building, he happened to run into the president's female secretary who was about to go home. "I got a reversal message from the president's female secretary. Godfather Kyle came to Stark's office building just now and resigned Stannis's position as president. This is too cool and domineering, right?" Pepper was filled with emotion, and secretly sighed that he was worthy of being Tony's godfather. He stepped on his high heels and walked into the elevator, and swiped his card to the president's office on the 68th floor. In the computer files that Stanley will not be able to delete in the future, Pepper found the list of secret transactions according to Tony's prompt, and was surprised and horrified to find the emails and videos between Stanley and terrorists in the Middle East. Without thinking too much, Pepper immediately made a call and found that Tony's cell phone could not be reached, so he informed the military contact Colonel Rhodes and Agent Kelson, the S.H.I.E.L.D. contact, of the crime. Rhodes is a good friend of Tony, and immediately said that he would rush to Tony's villa to confirm his safety. Kelson took several agents and came to join Pepper to track down and arrest Stanislav himself. This period of time happened exactly when Tony was taken from the new Corps and was lying on the floor of the hall at home waiting to die. "Tony, are you okay?" Rhodes, who was dressed in casual clothes, rushed to the villa while ignoring the traffic rules all the way. As soon as he entered the brightly lit lobby on the first floor, he shouted anxiously inside. There was no response from Tony, but a flat and calm voice came from the sofa. "Soldier, what are you yelling for?" "Okay." Rhodes was taken aback, and subconsciously put his right hand on the gun at his waist, but when his keen eyes fell on the sofa and saw the silver-haired young man from the source of the sound, his taut dark face immediately showed respect, and suddenly he gave a military salute. "Hi, Major General Kyle, young general. I publicly retired more than 60 years ago." Kyle glanced at him calmly, sat on the sofa with his legs crossed, held a glass of bright red wine, and gently tasted in one bite. "I know, but you've been my idol since I was a kid, so," Rhodes said halfway, remembering that this is not the time to meet an idol. He hurriedly changed his words and asked, "Where's Tony?" Where is Tony now? He's in the basement now, and he should be ready to leave, Kyle said calmly. At the moment when everyone was anxious and dignified, he was very casual and calm. It seems that what is about to happen is none of his business, and it seems that everything is under his control. Then I'll go down first, and see you next time. Rhodes dropped a sentence and rushed downstairs in a hurry. As soon as he reached the basement, he heard the clinking of various mechanical brakes. He followed his gaze, and on the workbench, Tony stood upright, the core on his chest glowed brightly, and the mechanical claws were putting on a close-fitting steel suit for him. Mark II. The perfect integration of the mechanical battle suit and the human body, and the gradual formation of the cool humanoid battle armor. Rhodes was a little crazy for a while, and said aloud, Tony, this is the coolest thing I have ever seen. Rhodes, you are here. Where is Pepper now? Tony asked in a deep voice. She and several agents are in Stark Industries, ready to capture Stannis, Rhodes replied quickly. It's not enough to rely on them alone. I'll go there now, Tony said. The iron suit has been put on, and he has transformed into a mechanical Iron Man, with a dazzling white light on the iron chest and the eye sockets of the mask. Need my help? When Rhodes asked, his eyes were fixed on the side of the workbench, where there was another unpainted original model suit. Empty the sky for me. As soon as Tony finished speaking, his hands hung down, the soles of his feet and palms of the engine roared, and the rapid acceleration of the white laser was emitted, and he smashed through the ceiling wall of the basement and left. It's almost time. Life came from the stairs behind him. Rhodes turned his head and saw Kyle walking down calmly holding a wine glass. Mr. Kyle, are you not worried at all? Rhodes couldn't help asking curiously. Worry about what? Kyle's rhetorical question made Rhodes slightly taken aback, and then smiled wryly. For the peace symbol that once ended World War II by one person, the Stanislav thing seems to be a bit of a mess. Rhodes suddenly remembered something. That's right. Mr. Kyle, since you returned, a general wanted to see you very much, and said that he wanted to ask you for help. He said that the military is preparing to deal with a monster, and the whole world only you can handle it. Monster? Kyle thought for a while, and said coldly, although I don't want to have anything to do with the US military, if the monster you are dealing with is worth my shot, I will think about it a little bit, then it's settled, Rhodes said with a sigh of relief, pointing to the sports car in the basement. I'm going to Stark Industries now. Do you want to go and have a look? Iron Man's first battle. Of course I have to watch it, but I don't need to take your car. Kyle put down his glass, and under Rhodes' puzzled eyes, he came to the open air with the hole in the ceiling. Sports car? It's too slow. Kyle threw down a sentence in disgust, and then the dark wings spread out, and the strong wind generated by the pad knocked all the items in the basement over. He rose into the sky like a ray of black light, turned at a, degree angle above the villa, and rushed into the distance like a bullet. Rhodes was stunned. If Tony's steel suit could barely explain the principle, then Kyle's supersonic flight with two wings could not be explained by science anyway. This is another world. Rhodes sighed with emotion, looked at the prototype battle suit reluctantly, and then ran to drive the sports car in desperation. At this time, Stark Industries, the manufacturing plant. The dented bullets were scattered all over the ground, and 3 or 4 agents in suits passed out, and even died tragically on the floor. The instruments and floors everywhere were as tragic as a violent storm. Pepper was running wildly in panic, with a 3 to 4 meter tall steel machine chasing after him. The thickened rough armor and thermal weapons made the steel suit ugly and huge. Boom boom boom. Every step it takes contains super-ton weight, leaving depressions on the factory floor, and the distance from Pepper is constantly shortening. Ah, Pepper exclaimed, but the heel of her left high-heeled shoe broke off, prompting her to fall forward to the ground. Ahoha! The steel machine arrived and stopped. Shadows covered Pepper's curled-up body. Stannis' laughter came from inside the suit, and there were grim and cold words. Pepper, you and Tony will meet in heaven together. The steel machine raised its steel left hand, with a Gatling-configured weapon on its wrist, and aimed a round of hollow muzzles at her. Pepper supported the floor with both hands, and closed his eyes in despair. Just at this critical moment, an invisible force swept past Pepper, and did not cause any harm to Pepper. And when it landed on the steel machine, the ton-armored body on the steel machine was violently thrown away, and was thrown away more than 10 meters away, smashing down several walls, wiping out sparks and rolling to the side. On the main road, Pepper opened his eyes for some unknown reason, and saw that in front of him, where the steel machine was originally standing, was occupied by an extremely beautiful black-haired woman. Yutong kept her hands open, the silver light in her beautiful eyes dissipated, and said with a slight smile, "The boss said, we must ensure the safety of the eldest nephew and woman." Chapter 234, starting the first battle of science and technology. "It's so beautiful. Who are you?" Staring blankly at Yutong standing in front of him in a long skirt, Pepper asked subconsciously, but she regretted it as soon as she blurted out, hurriedly got up from the ground, and said gratefully, "No matter what, it's alright, thank you so much for saving me, that's what it should be, after all, sooner or later it's my family." Yutong withdrew her hands, showing a cold smile. Pepper was confused. She patted her dusty skirt and muttered in surprise, "My family? My name is Yutong, and I'm under Patriarch Kyle." Yutong nodded slightly. "So it's Godfather Kyle?" Pepper's eyes widened in surprise. Recalling the conversation just now, her delicate face couldn't help but rosy, and he said falteringly, "Well, Tony and I haven't." Before she could finish speaking, Yutong seemed to sense something, and quickly raised her head to look at the night sky outside the factory, and said inexplicably, "It's finally here, what's coming?" Pepper was stunned again. The next moment, a pleasant cell phone rang from the pocket of her suit jacket. Pepper took out his mobile phone, looked at the screen, and found that it was Tony's call, and quickly connected it. "Pepper, are you okay?" Tony's anxious voice rang from the phone, accompanied by heavy panting, as if he was exercising outdoors. Pepper's heart suddenly warmed up, and he quickly replied, "I'm fine. Godfather Kyle's people saved me. But Stanislav also has a pair of armored suits, and now he has become a murderous maniac. It's fine. As for Stanislav, I'll take care of it." After Tony finished speaking domineeringly, the phone simply hung up. Pepper raised his head, and Yutong looked out at the sky. There, a bright red meteor with a dazzling daytime tail flame appeared from the edge of the night sky, accelerated obliquely downward, and crashed towards the road where traffic was at a standstill. At this time, the main road next to the Stark industrial area. As the steel machine suddenly rolled down in the middle of the road, the horns of many passing vehicles kept beeping. Some vehicles even crashed into the side road guardrail in order to avoid a series of collision reactions. The scene was extremely chaotic for a while. "Bastard, what happened just now?" Stanislav was extremely annoyed. He didn't know what happened just now. He just felt like he was hit by a high-speed train, and he was thrown out with his suit. He manipulated the steel machine to get up from the cement road, and saw a small van with the headlights on and barely stopped in front of him. Angrily, he raised the left foot of the huge machine, and kicked it hard on the ground with the anti-collision on the front of the facility. Boom! The front of the van collapsed inward, and under the impact of several tons, it couldn't stop flying backwards. Just when the car was about to overturn, a bright red Iron Man with local tyrant gold paint fell down. The palms of both hands struggled to withstand the rear of the car, and the steel feet acted as brakes against the ground. Laugh! Accompanied by a sharp sound, two bright sparks appeared on the soles of Iron Man's feet, and he retreated 5 meters away before steadily stopping the car. Tony, Iron Machine, looked at Iron Man, who suddenly appeared, spread his hands, and said in a cold voice, "I've let you go. Do you still want to come over to die?" "Stanley, stop," Iron Man persuaded. "Stop? Ho ha ho ha," Iron Machine laughed. Staring at him with white eyes, "Howard is not behind. Stark Industries is supported by me. Now your godfather wants to drive me away. Just kick me away. How can it be that simple?" Taking advantage of the confrontation between the two, many drivers who had accidents in the surrounding area abandoned their cars in panic. "If you want to attack the godfather, you must first ask me if I agree with you," the Iron Man snorted coldly, and the steel machine didn't say much, picked up a motorcycle next to it, swung it as a weapon, and rushed forward. The duel of the steel suits is about to start. Yutong took Pepper to the open-air roof on the 3rd floor of the manufacturing plant, where you could just see the battle on the road. On the highway, flames and explosions continued one after another. Humanoid machines, one large and one small, fought fiercely together, sometimes using steel armor for melee combat, and sometimes using ammunition and artillery for long-range attacks. "Tony, you must win." Pepper's heart was on Tony, and he clasped his hands together anxiously. At this moment, a male voice suddenly sounded beside him. "It seems that I just caught up." Pepper was taken aback and looked sideways, but at some point, Kyle in a black windbreaker had come to her side, also watching the technological battle on the highway. "Boss," Yutong smiled and approached. wrapping her slender white hands around his arms naturally. "Teach. Mr. Kyle," Pepper greeted with enough respect, and almost followed Tony to call him Godfather. "Look well. This is the advanced technology of the Earth, the first battle displayed in the eyes of the world and the public." Kyle smiled lightly, and the golden pupils reflected the flickering fire of the battle. "The rich rely on technology, the poor rely on mutation. This is the first rule of the current Marvel world." As for the first mutant battle, he and Steve had demonstrated it on the base as early as more than half a century ago during World War II. Even though that was just a low-end start for mutations, it was still enough to dominate large-scale wars for ordinary people. Regardless of whether it is technology or mutation, only when its existence is exposed to the eyes of the world and the public, and as local wars, large and small, show extraordinary abilities, will the people of the Earth accept and recognize the changes of the current era more quickly because of fear and fear. In road warfare, the Iron Man was gradually suppressed by the steel machine, flung around like a ball, and smashed violently on the abandoned bus. The steel machine raised its shoulders and fired a small missile, turning the 10-meter area where Iron Man was into a raging sea of flames. "Mr. Kyle, can Tony win?" Pepper looked worried and asked anxiously. "That's up to Tony." Kyle touched his chin, and calmly analyzed. Based solely on the frontal combat performance comparison, Stanislav has no bottom line. Although the modified Mark, is a bit ugly, the combat capability is fierce and powerful. And Tony made it later. Mark II has comprehensive performance, but it is still inferior to combat. More importantly, Kyle paused for a moment, and said a little deceptively, "I gave him the old energy core, and it should be almost out of energy now." "What did you say?" Pepper opened his eyes wide, looking at the battle situation in a panic, and saw that the light source on Iron Man's chest was much dimmer. "Running out of energy, it can't be delayed any longer." Tony in the battle knew this, of course. Wearing a battered and torn battlesuit, he resolutely looked at the night sky above his head, made a certain decision, started the engine under his feet, and shot straight into the sky like a rocket. "Where to escape?" Stevenson yelled coldly. A large amount of exhaust gas sprayed out from the soles of his feet, and his huge steel body followed closely behind. As if they were comparing each other, they continued to accelerate towards the vast dark night sky. Seeing this scene, Kyle on the roof of the factory building couldn't help shaking his head. "It's over, brainless guy. If it's not over yet, it's time for him to take action to end this mess." Chapter 235 Undefeated Legend. Under the watchful eyes of Kyle and the others, Tony and Stanley, relying on their steel suits, chased each other straight into the night sky. Until it turned into sporadic 2 points, completely disappeared in the sky. "This scene is really familiar." Kyle raised his head slightly and muttered to himself. To have the belief that you must die, to fight for the hope of victory, is to die and survive. This is exactly what he wants Tony to understand tonight. Human beings are like ants as low as dust in the universe. Even if they have the opportunity to step up to the sky of evolution, if they don't have enough strong hearts, how can they be comparable to gods one day? "After this war, you are the unique hero on Earth, Iron Man," Kyle was whispering, and Pepper on the side exclaimed, but something fell from the night sky above his head. When he looked closely, it was the steel battlesuit that Stanislav was wearing. At this time, a layer of white frost had condensed on the surface of the steel machine, and all parts were dimmed after being turned off, like a huge piece of scrap iron falling down. Ordinary steel materials will freeze at an altitude of, meters. Even Tony himself has suffered from this seemingly popular knowledge blind spot. If Kyle hadn't made a secret move, he might have fallen into a pile of scrap iron. Tony's new model of the Mark suit now uses the material of an aerospace ship, which can prevent high-altitude frost and freezing. It can no longer be simply called Iron Man. Boom. From a height of, meters, the steel machine fell straight behind Kyle and the others, on the third-floor roof of the manufacturing factory with a deafening sound. A huge hole collapsed downward, and gravel and dust were scattered everywhere. Obviously there is no threat, but it seems that he does not want the dust to get on Kyle's windbreaker. Yutong's clear eyes are shining with silver light, and his thoughts are like invisible ripples, shaking away all the dust that splashes down. "Where's Tony?" Pepper covered her ears, looked up anxiously, and finally saw the Iron Man appearing in the air. Thor consumed only a small amount of energy left in the old core, and intermittently turned on the engine on the soles of his feet, continuously slowing down the falling speed, and finally fell in front of everyone with a slam. He tore off the steel mask by himself, revealing a tired and pale face. "Tony!" Pepper rushed out impatiently, and hugged Thor's steel shell. Thor gasped for breath and hugged her back, apparently with lingering fear. When Tony saw Kyle, he blinked weakly and said, "Godfather. How about it? I'm doing okay, pass." Kyle smiled and gave a pertinent evaluation. "What, you just passed?" Tony twitched the corners of his mouth, and with Pepper's support, he was about to say something when a weird voice sounded out of place. Kyle and the others turned around, and saw a metal steel claw grasping the edge of the huge hole just now, and then the steel head and body slowly crawled out of it, staring at everyone with glaring eyes. "The anti-earthquake countermeasures have been strengthened so much, let me do it." Tony's expression changed, and he hurriedly pushed Pepper's hand away, but just as he took a step forward, he staggered and fell to the ground on one knee. "Tony, that's it," Kyle said calmly. Tony looked at his chest. The light of the old core was like a candle, so dim that it was almost completely extinguished. Knowing that he was unable to fight, he sighed helplessly. "Go away. Godfather, leave me alone and take Pepper away from here." "I'm not leaving." Pepper was about to cry anxiously, hugging Tony with reddish eyes. Looking at the two people who were parting from life and death, Kyle was a little speechless. Well, he hasn't shown his strength when he returned to Earth, so now everyone really regards him as a mascot of peace symbol? Yutong, protect the two of them. Kyle shrugged, and after Yutong let go of his arms, he took a few steps forward and faced the steel machine alone. "Godfather, what are you going to do? With the physique of a super soldier alone, you can't fight that high-tech coat," Tony said anxiously. In the teaching of his father Howard, Tony still knows the existence of super soldiers, and in the current Stark industry, he has newly developed a super potion that is very similar to the super soldier potion. But as thermal weapons become more powerful and the attack power of bullets and missiles increases infinitely, the mutant physique of super soldiers becomes more difficult to deal with. On Earth in the 21st century, the era of invincible super soldiers has passed. "It's just right. I've been looking for you, symbol of peace." Stanislav laughed, raised his steel right hand, activated the Gatling device, and aimed a round of guns at Kyle who was close to him. Kyle ignored the danger of the guns in front of him, and walked forward step by step, while answering Tony's question. "Tony, your father must have never told you that I walked through a nuclear explosion more than 60 years ago. Once, let alone now. Taking advantage of this opportunity, I'll let you take a look at the physical capabilities that mutations can achieve." Before Kyle could finish speaking, Stannis shot. Gatling on his right arm was braving blue flames, bullets rained down on his body, and it was inevitable. Seeing this terrifying scene, Yutong's cold face was calm. Pepper covered his eyes and dared not look down. Tony opened his eyes wide in surprise. Boom, boom, boom. The dense bullets hit the surface of Kyle's body, and a layer of dark cuticle quickly emerged. The black liquid squirmed at a speed visible to the naked eye, covering the body from the chest to the limbs and head, forming a ferocious and wild biological shell. The long-lost feeling, under the continuous shooting of bullets, a triumphant voice came out of Kyle's mind, as if what he was facing was not a deadly ammunition offensive, but a bullet bath that entertained a feast. Indeed, those bullets seemed to be tickling, falling on the venom-covered body surface of Kyle, and the clanging bells scattered all over the place. How can that be? Looking at the humanoid monster who ignored the bullets and continued to move forward, Stannis' manic laughter stopped abruptly and was replaced by panic and incomprehension. "Is that the Godfather?" Tony gasped, and only then did he understand why his father had always guaranteed the Godfather's combat power as an undefeated myth. When the bullets were exhausted, Stannis retracted his right hand in a panic, raised his steel left hand, and the last built-in small missile appeared there. "I don't believe I can't kill you," Stanny growled, and launched a missile at Kyle who was less than 5 meters away. The small missile quickly flew out with tail flames, and rushed straight towards the devilish face. Kyle had no intention of evading. Raised his right hand, and made an action that many people will never forget in their lifetime. All I saw was that his long and scarlet eyes were shining, and he slapped the small missile right in front of him swiftly and forcefully. Boom! The small missile was simply hit off the trajectory, and a devastating explosion was emitted beside Kyle. The explosion wave set off a dust wave and swept out, and the flames shone on his monster body full of dark muscles. As if completing a simple act of swatting a fly, Kyle walked at a constant speed, and finally came to a stop in front of the steel machine. Stannis motionless, as if he didn't have the courage to launch any offensive. He could only look at Kyle in despair, and ask tremblingly, "Are you a human or a monster, me?" Kyle grinned grinningly, without saying too much, clenched his right hand into a fist, and bombarded the round core of the steel machine with short-term energy. Crack! The steel shell and the new energy core, like fragile tofu, shattered with cracks under the blow of extraordinary power. Chapter 236 The Man Behind Iron Man. It is not a simple 10-ton punch, but the power is concentrated at the end of the fist, and it is released under the control of superb fighting skills. This full blow is unstoppable even if it is as hard as steel. Kyle is fully covered with venom, his scarlet eyes flicker with coquettish pupils, the face of the Black Demon maintains a cold grin, and his tall physique is full of muscles due to the tense power storage of the battle. 1/3 of the entire thick dark right arm is stuck in the middle of the chest of the steel machine, about to touch the inner flesh and blood of Stanislav. The steel shell is dented and cracked, and the new energy core is flickering white arcs. Kyle stood on the spot, using his right hand to raise the steel machine off the ground until it was above his head. The engine of the steel machine stalled, and the steel limbs drooped down, like a defeated prey in nature. The perspective effect of this scene is undoubtedly shocking. Tony didn't blink for a long time, just stared intently, holding his breath, feeling the extraordinary sense of power and the unparalleled level of combat power. Pepper covered her mouth with her hands in surprise. Only by doing so could she force herself to suppress the exclamation in her throat. "It's over." Kyle shook his head and threw the steel machine forward. The several-ton steel machine flew a few meters away, falling like scrap iron on the roof of the 3rd floor, raising billowing dust. From the hole in the steel machine's chest, viscous blood trickled down the damaged steel shell like special engine oil. Kyle's punch didn't land on Stannis, but the impact of that punch was transmitted to the inside of the steel suit, and Stannis, an ordinary person's body, couldn't bear it at all. "I can't even warm up." Kyle clapped his hands a little bored, and the dark creature coat gradually faded away, returning to an ordinary windbreaker. This is the difference between technology and mutation. Technology focuses on black technology tools, while mutation focuses on superpower physique. The best state is both technology and mutation, such as Kyle himself, Captain America, Black Panther, and the future Little Spider and so on. As for Tony, Kyle turned to look at Tony, only to find that Tony had passed out, half lying on the roof of the building, and his head, still wearing a steel helmet, was poured into Pepper's arms. The light dimmed and went out. Pepper sat on the ground, hugged Tony tightly, and asked Kyle for help with tears in his eyes. "Godfather, save Tony quickly. Tony seems to be dying soon. Don't worry. With me here, he can't die," Kyle said calmly, walked over, and drew 3 cards from the card space. After a day. Tony's villa, the master room. In the early morning, the breeze blew up the curtains next to the bed, and the warm sunlight poured into the room. Tony on the bed frowned slightly, and then his brain tended to wake up, and he opened his dark and deep eyes. The scene of fighting the steel machine flashed in his mind. Tony suddenly straightened his upper body from the bed, and looked blankly at the palms of his hands. He pinched the corner of his clothes in shock, lifted off his shirt, and looked down at his chest eagerly. "I saw a piece of white and tender skin there, without any hollow and fatal wounds. There is no glowing steel energy core, not even an iota of wound scars exist. What's going on here?" Tony stretched out his hand and touched it. Muttering to himself with a suspicious expression on his face, could it be that everything I discovered before was just a dream? Seemingly disturbed by his words, Peggy, who fell asleep by the bedside at night, woke up after a murmur, and when she saw Tony, who was touching himself and talking to himself, she immediately scolded, "Tony, what are you doing?" "What?" Tony was even more surprised when he saw Pepper. "Pepper, why are you here? Stanley didn't hurt you, did he? You're sleepy." Pepper gave him a blank look, reached out and touched his forehead, reminding him worriedly, "Have you forgotten? Stanislav was defeated by the Godfather, so it was the Godfather who saved me." Tony was still touching his chest, the huge wound that was obviously fatal, but now he couldn't even see a trace of the wound, which was really incredible. Pepper replied with lingering fear, "Yes, the Godfather is really amazing. I was crying the night before yesterday, but the Godfather didn't take you to the hospital, but drove you back here." Recalling the miraculous scene the night before, Pepper couldn't help feeling emotional. "Then, Miss Yutong used a scalpel to quickly take out the energy core and shrapnel in your chest. That blood volume is really scary. Just take out the shrapnel." Tony opened his mouth wide, and said in a daze, "Then how did I survive until now?" and have completely recovered. This is where Godfather is so magical. Pepper made a fool of himself, and then said solemnly, the moment you took out the shrapnel, you were really about to die, and the blood couldn't stop at all. And then, the Godfather fed you a bean. To be precise, it was half a bean. In just a few seconds, your wound heals itself. Bean. Tony was confused. The troublesome injuries that plagued him were resolved by half a bean? By the way, the Godfather left you something before he left. Pepper took out an envelope from his suit pocket and handed it to Tony. Tony took it with both hands, opened it carefully, and found that there was only a yellowed manuscript folded into a square inside. On the draft with a certain history, the atomic structure diagram of a certain element is drawn, and there is an English text and signature below it. Future technological energy, new elements, Krypton gold. Founders, Howard, Kyle. It was written by my father. Tony stared blankly, touching the draft with his fingers. Tony. Pepper took a deep breath, looked at Tony and said, the Godfather said that you don't need to worry too much, you can follow your heart and do what you want. No matter what happens in the future, he is behind you as your solid backing. I understand. After a long silence, Tony nodded and put away the Krypton gold structure diagram. His eyes tended to be firm with steel. Only then did Pepper sigh secretly, and the executive secretary picked up the work schedule, and said eloquently, S.H.I.E.L.D. has dealt with Stanley's funeral, and cooperated with the military, and is going to find an excuse to cover up your matter to the mass media. However, all of these require your cooperation and clarification at the press conference. Clarify that I'm not Iron Man. Tony smiled inexplicably, and said seriously, you arrange a press conference now, and in 3 or 10 minutes, I will give an explanation to the mass media. Pepper froze for a moment. For some reason, looking at Tony with a dignified face, he suddenly felt uneasy. At this time on the other side, the bustling streets of Queens, New York. Kyle, wearing a hood and sunglasses, accompanied by Yutong in a long black dress, stopped at the entrance of a luxurious and fashionable skyscraper. As expected of you. The traffic location here is very good, and it is not far from Stark Industries and S.H.I.E.L.D. headquarters. It is quite suitable as the branch base of the Carl family facing the outside world, Kyle praised, and Yutong, who is wearing a sun hat, smiled slightly. Weiss. Contact the owner of this building immediately. I want to buy the whole building. Kyle thought about the smartwatch on his wrist and said, by the way, register a company, use the card as the registered logo, and use the card as the registered logo. In the name of the head of the Carl family, the name of the company is called Supernatural Firm. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 237 The Birth of the Avengers. Stark Industries area, press conference site the night before yesterday. The high-tech armed fights between Iron Man and Iron Machine on the highway and on the roof of the Stark Industries factory caused a commotion in the whole city and even the whole world. Until the end, it was rumored that someone saw the appearance of Kyle, the symbol of peace, which brought the already important focus of current affairs to a higher level. After all, it is now in the initial stage of the reform of the times, and any topics involving peace symbols, superheroes, and alien invasions have basically risen to exaggerated heights of popular discussion among the people. So when the press conference with Tony's appearance was held, almost all the media reporters from all over New York came and filled the seats under the conference stage, and various TV channels also broadcast live news about it. On behalf of the military, Colonel Rhodes took the lead in telling a lot of official words on the podium, which made some reporters fall asleep early in the morning. Now, let's invite the chairman of Stark Industries, Tony Stark. After Rhodes finished speaking and raised his hand loudly to the side, the media at the scene immediately applauded expectantly. Tony, dressed in a suit and dressed in a personable manner, walked onto the stage holding the script of the speech prepared by S.H.I.E.L.D. Rhodes, who was wearing a military cap, stood beside him in a military posture and nodded encouragingly. Tony coughed and said, well, you must have thought that I was the one who fought a steel monster on the road and on the roof of the factory building last night. A female reporter raised her hand and interrupted his words. Mr. Stark, someone saw your godfather appear, and you still want to say that Iron Man is your bodyguard? Of course not. Please listen to me. Tony shrugged, never looked at the speech from the beginning until now, and continued to say solemnly, to be honest, I was not born as a superhero, and I have many personality flaws. Unfortunately, who made my godfather a symbol of peace? Tony, Rhodes lowered his voice, suddenly feeling ominous. That's right, Tony looked around at the media in the audience, faced the camera, and admitted firmly, I am Iron Man. As soon as the words fell, the entire press conference exploded in an instant. Countless reporters stood up in amazement, and rushed forward with microphones in their hands. May I ask how the flying steel coat was made? What undisclosed advanced technology does Stark Industries have, as the symbol of peace and after Captain America, the third superhero recognized by the world? What do you think? How much did your godfather help you? How did he guide you on your way to being a superhero? Will you spread the weapons used by Iron Man to the military? A bunch of questions rang out one after another, and Tony answered some simple questions, while Rhodes next to him patted his forehead helplessly. The previous preparations by S.H.I.E.L.D. and the military were all in vain now. The disclosure of Iron Man's identity, whether it is good or bad, at least from now on, Tony is destined to be linked with a superhero, and he can no longer relax in peace. There were constant questions at the press conference, and the excited reporters were on the verge of losing control. Some staff members began to form a human wall to maintain order. At this moment, many journalists crowded together. Their mobile phones vibrated and rang at the same time. They took out their mobile phones, answered the call, or read the contents of the text messages on their mobile phones. Their faces suddenly flushed with excitement, and they didn't care to ask Tony anymore, so they dragged the photographers and ran out of the door. In just half a minute, hundreds of reporters almost ran away, and the chairs under the stage were in a mess. While Tony breathed a sigh of relief, he looked at Rhodes in surprise and asked, What happened? You ask me. I don't know. Rhodes spread his hands angrily. But soon, he also took out his mobile phone as if he had received a message, looked at the screen, and suddenly raised the mobile phone. Yes. Your godfather just bought the Emgren building and founded a company called Supernatural Office. The company has also made it public. I knew it. Tony smiled casually. Only he can snatch away the headlines that revealed my identity as Iron Man. Rhodes was silent for a moment, then sighed and said, The times are really about to change. On this day, various newspapers, magazines, and online news hurriedly published 2 headlines about Iron Man's true identity and the establishment of a supernatural agency. Tony Stark's godfather is Kyle. This is a fact that people have known for a long time. When Tony announced that he was Iron Man, it once again aroused people's collective heated discussion. You know, Captain America Steve and Kyle also have a very deep comrade-in-arms relationship. Certainly this is even more interesting to talk about Kyle's founding of the Supernatural Agency. The Supernatural Office is open to the public. It is a private enterprise of the family where Kyle, the symbol of peace, only contracts to deal with supernatural-related affairs. The company does not recruit people from outside. There are only 30 employees in the whole building, all of whom claim to be members of the Carl family, and the chairman is Kyle himself. The Supernatural Office also divides affairs into kings, dragons, gods, and disasters, 4 dangerous levels, all of which are supernatural disasters that are beyond the scope of human common sense. The lowest level of the king class is the kind of steel machine from the night before yesterday. The masses talked about it a lot, feeling extremely novel, and really felt that the world was changing at an unprecedented speed. Late that night, in the meeting room on the top floor of the DeHeo building, under the mild lighting, several people sat close together on the leather sofa, sipping fine wine. The release of everyone's identity and files here will shock the world, but at this time, they gathered together because of one person. Kyle was sitting on a single sofa, and Yutong was standing next to him. Tony lay beside him, on the same ottoman as Natasha. There was also a large sofa, which was occupied by Furui alone. Several people formed a triangle-like distribution. Fury. I'll call you here for you. If you have anything to say, just say it. Kyle smiled lightly, staring at Fury's dark, ferocious face that was almost invisible at night. First of all, I can say that everyone present, except me, is a Superman who is beyond the scope of ordinary people. Fury used this as his opening remarks, looked at a few people with one eye, and said in a deep voice, because of the information Kyle brought back from the universe and what happened the night before, I decided to use S.H.I.E.L.D. team. Kyle's eyes brightened slightly, and he was the first to flash a glimpse of understanding. Team, Tony chanted repeatedly, and asked curiously, what team? Fury replied in a deep voice, a team of heroes, I call it the Avengers. Chapter 238 The Strongest on the Surface, Hulk. The Avengers, the name of this team itself is a bit intriguing. The eyes of everyone present were dignified, and they all fell into short thoughts. During this period of time, it is also time to form a hero team. Kyle had expected it a long time ago, smiled indifferently, took a sip of red wine, and did not express his opinion immediately. Yutong behind him was expressionless. Apart from Kyle, there was nothing else in the world that could arouse her interest. The Avengers. The name is interpreted in Oriental language, which is to carry out the central idea of if no one offends me, I will not offend others. If the enemy offends me, I will pay back 10 times, using this way of thinking and handling to deal with the upcoming powerful enemies. An alien invasion is undoubtedly one of the best choices at present. Fury looked around a few people, and said seriously, the predecessor of the Avengers was the Science and Strategy Department during World War II decades ago. It was originally named after Howard Stark, Peggy Carter, and Kyle Carter. Dove, and a special team formed by Steve Rogers to target the Hydra organization with advanced technology and vainly trying to dominate the Earth. Fury. You said that, but I haven't agreed yet. You put me directly on the list of the Avengers? I have been the director of S.H.I.E.L.D. for so long, and I have learned to be good. Kyle's face gradually faded. Cold, a strong sense of oppression surged vaguely on his body, and even the air conditioning in the room was inexplicably stagnant and hot. Godfather, Patriarch, Tony and Natasha's expressions changed slightly, and they looked at Kyle anxiously, wondering why he suddenly became angry. Fury's dark face was also angry, and he glanced at Kyle angrily, and said bitterly, "You guy, you have the nerve to say it. More than half a century ago, you threw the shield me. Now that you're back, even if you don't do any work, you still have to use your name to suppress the Avengers." The rest of the people were dumbfounded. They didn't expect that the man who was as serious as Fury, the former director of S.H.I.E.L.D., and whom the remnants of Hydra feared every day, had a side like a little bitch. Kyle's originally indifferent face suddenly smiled, and shrugged his shoulders confidently. "Those who can do more work, I'm training you." At this moment, Tony and the others understood that the relationship between the two was an old friend's position, and they teased each other. Fury stared at Kyle with one eye, and said in a deep voice, "Come on. No matter what, the Avengers cannot do without you. You are the core pillar of heroic spirit and strength." "No. In terms of strength, Tony will grow up in the future, but he is no weaker than me," Kyle said, leaning casually on the soft leather sofa, and changed the subject. "As for the spiritual pillar, if that person is not dead, he would be more suitable than me." The people present were silent when they heard the words, knowing who Kyle was talking about. Fury's deep one-eye revealed a gleam of light, which quickly disappeared, and said sincerely, "Kyle, I will take you to a place in a week, okay?" Kyle only said this word, and then he didn't make a sound, and didn't ask Fury where he was going to take him. Natasha shook off her sexy short red hair, crossed her arms and hugged her chest, and pursed her red lips. "As the deputy director of S.H.I.E.L.D., I have already started to deal with the handover of the Avengers and S.H.I.E.L.D. The Avengers, after number 1 officially joined." Fury set his sights on Tony, waiting for him to make a choice. Yet, Tony raised his eyebrows slightly, and stroked the stubble of his chin. "Since both my father and Godfather have been in that alliance, I'll try joining first." The second person officially joined. Fury turned his gaze to Yutong behind Kyle, but Yutong didn't even look at him, which made his serious face show a slightly embarrassed expression. "Okay. Fury, I can lend you Natasha until now, and you have borrowed my name, so don't think about picking someone from me." Kyle smiled lightly. "But in this way, there are only 2 people as the basic combat strength of the alliance, which is far from enough." Fury scratched his bald head and said helplessly, "It's up to you to find someone by yourself." Kyle just finished speaking. There was a ticking sound on the wrist of his left hand, but it was the sudden change of Weese's watch indicating that he had received an email message. "It's so late, who still sends a message?" Kyle frowned slightly. Not long after he returned to Earth, there were no more than 3 people who knew his online email number. Ignoring the few people around who were discussing the specific matters of the alliance, Kyle unlocked the smartwatch, which was automatically enlarged and transformed into a new type of tablet computer in an instant. With Erlang's legs raised, Kyle leaned his neck on the sofa, and the virtual screen immediately opened the email. "To Mr. Kyle, I am General Thunderbolt. Due to the emergency, please forgive me for disturbing your rest so late. Here, I solemnly invite you to lead our army to complete an action mission to encircle and arrest prisoners. The content of this mission is too complicated and dangerous. Please make a decision after watching the video. If you are interested, please be sure to email me back tomorrow morning. At the end, a video was attached, which was marked as internal information taken by the military 4 years ago. Before Kyle said anything, Weiss played the video consciously. At the beginning of the video, there is a scene of desolate mountains, rivers and deserts. It looks like it was taken by a camera on top of a tank. The quality of the picture is not clear, and the angle of view is fixed to a vast desert. Traces of helicopters and fighter jets can be seen in the sky. Fire the cannon, kill it. The tanks were constantly humming and firing, and the artillery fire was intensively hitting the desert a kilometer ahead. There was no enemy army there, only a green creature that looked like a human. Boom boom boom. The area it was in was covered by artillery fire, and the dust billowed, but no matter what, the green creature never fell down. Instead, it let out a huge monster's roar, and the sound vibrated and resounded for kilometers. Under the attack of the artillery fire, the green creature suddenly accelerated towards the camera, sprinted, and jumped. In just a few seconds, the green creature crossed 1,000 meters and came to the front. The 2 or 3 meter tall monster's body shocked the eyeballs. Its thick and big hands held the barrel of the tank in front, and tore off the steel barrel with all its strength. Just smashed the tank into a pile of scrap copper and iron. Finally, it roared ferociously towards the camera, and rushed forward. The tank where the camera was located rolled and fell out like a toy, and the video turned into a blurry screen that lost signal. The monster Rhodes mentioned last time is indeed it, Hulk. Kyle was expressionless, and took back the tablet indifferently, but for some reason, the blood in his body was slightly agitated, and there was a sudden urge to compete with him in his heart. It wasn't a whim. This impulse became more and more intense after it appeared, until the fists were clenched suddenly, the golden pupil faintly ignited a bright flame, and the venom let out a laugh of excitement and joy in his mind. Yutong stretched out her hand and put it gently on Kyle's shoulder, kneading the muscles to relax and soothe. "Godfather, what video did you watch just now?" Tony saw his abnormality and asked solemnly. "Nothing," Kyle exhaled, smiled at Fury and said, "The high-end combat candidate you want is here, Hulk, known as the strongest hero on the surface, the peak representative of mutant physique." When Kyle saw the Hulk, his divine body became more excited than ever, and his long-lost desire to fight could hardly be concealed. Brush the Hulk, please support CAC with the next monthly pass. Period. Chapter 240 The Battle for the Strongest Creature. Brazil, Racine slums, a cheap rental single room. The decoration of the room is too old and simple. The walls are peeling off due to old age, but all kinds of furniture are arranged simply and neatly. Under the dim light from the glass windows, on a small square straw mat sat cross-legged a young man with curly hair and wearing only a pair of large underpants. He controlled his breathing evenly, and began to slowly lower his eyelids, practicing a kind of Indian yoga breathing technique, that is, using abdominal breathing to slow down his pulse, thereby adjusting his physical and mental emotions. But not long after he closed his eyes, his vision escaped into the infinite darkness, and a green monster trapped in the subconscious cage roared angrily at him. The green and berserk powerful cells that filled the blood vessels and genes were rapidly eroding and infecting other red blood cells. Hoo-hoo, the curly-haired youth began to gasp for breath, his face was slightly ferocious, the veins on his forehead were protruding, and cold sweat poured out like pulp and wet his whole body. Although I tried my best to suppress it, I was still on the verge of losing control of my body. "Don't come out," the curly-haired young man let out a low growl, and suddenly opened his eyes, and he didn't know when his hands were already tightly clenched with sweat. He hurriedly looked at his left wrist, where there was a real heart rate monitoring watch, and the number on it that exceeded 100 began to gradually decrease, tending to the value of more than, for normal people. "Here we go again," the curly-haired youth smiled wryly. "I have been hiding here in Brazil for more than 3 years. After mastering ancient yoga and integrating into the local life, as long as I control my emotions and not get angry, I will not become the Hulk who only knows how to fight and destroy." Now, more than 100 days have passed since he turned into the Hulk last time. But for some reason, during this period of time, the Hulk, who has always been quiet, became more and more restless, and began to consciously break free from the shackles and go out to somewhere in the West. The West is America. In his hometown, there's his beloved, a place that he misses but can't get close to. However, in the past 2 days, the curly-haired young man felt a strong sense of uneasiness, as if there was something in the United States that attracted the Hulk, and his anger was approaching the critical point of transformation many times. No matter what, I will not let you out, let alone let you go back to New York, USA. The curly-haired young man took a deep breath, calmed down, dried the sweat on his body with a towel, and continued to practice Indian yoga to adjust his emotions. The heart has the tigers, fine sniffing the rose. Whoever dares to provoke me will destroy the world. Over the vast ocean, on an American giant transport fighter plane sailing towards Brazil. Inside the cabin, armed soldiers who were ready sat silently in rows of seats. The combat classification was changed to reconnaissance and logistics. Although the danger of the mission was greatly reduced, it also caused a little dissatisfaction among these elite soldiers. Of course, if they knew what kind of enemy they were about to face, they probably wouldn't think so. The armed soldiers raised their heads from time to time, and cast their gazes as if they were idols to one place. Accompanied by General Ross. There was only a silver-haired young man sitting upright with his eyes closed. Kyle's handsome face was expressionless, but at this moment his state of mind was far less peaceful than it seemed. The closer the fighter plane is to its destination in Brazil, the desire to fight is like a burning fire, burning brighter and brighter. One mountain cannot tolerate 2 tigers. If the earth is compared to that mountain, then there are creatures that can act as tigers by virtue of their physique, and there are only Kyle and the Hulk in the current world. Kyle has never had such a strong desire to win as at this moment. After he got the Protus gene card, he urgently needs to compete with an existence of the same level. Mr. Kyle, do you really want to face the Hulk alone? General Ross lowered his voice and said worriedly. It's not that he doesn't believe in peace symbols, but the Hulk is just too powerful. He was so powerful that he didn't dare to tell the elite soldiers in advance that what he was going to hunt down and arrest was an invincible monster. I'm very sure. Kyle nodded, opened his eyes, and the golden pupil flashed a bright look. The strongest surface. I am very dissatisfied. Around 9 in the evening. The Recinia slum in Brazil is different from the bustling big cities. The lights in the residential area next to the factory are dimmed early, and the local residents after a hard day basically go to sleep. At this time, several mysterious vehicles were parked in an alley in the residential area. One of them is a bulletproof camouflaged car with bright lights and a spacious interior, equipped with various technological instruments and several split screens. General Ross was wearing a headset and holding a military-style walkie-talkie, looking at Kyle who was sitting directly opposite him. It can't be wrong, Bruce Banner is in his house. Kyle shrugged and suggested, let your soldiers go there first, and try to see if you can capture it directly in human form. If you can't capture it, it's best to lead it to the factory. Residents' houses here are too dense to fit fighting. General Ross nodded, and obediently gave instructions to the walkie-talkie. All elite soldiers, put on nerve-numbing firearms, and sneak into the targeted residence. After receiving the order, the doors of the other cars opened immediately, and nearly 10 heavily armed elite soldiers skillfully lowered their bodies and quickly entered the streets and alleys. They are worthy of being the elite of the elite. Under the cover of the night, no one can find their figures and traces. Amabu rushed to the forefront, and the darkness and narrow streets and alleys did not affect his agility, and he quickly arrived at the downstairs of the destination house. Now, the big black dog tethered downstairs was startled. As soon as it barked for the first time, Amabu reacted and aimed and fired. The bullet from the paralyzing gun hit the big black dog's neck accurately, causing it to lie on the ground without a sound. Amabu waved forward, and the teammates behind him followed immediately, and together they quickly walked up the stairs to the 3rd floor. Boom! A small bomb was installed on the door of the target single room, and after detonation, Amabu rushed into the room with a gun in the flying debris of the wooden boards, and shot a few shots at the bed of the single room. If all goes well, the operation should end here. Amabu raised his eyebrows, keenly aware that something was wrong, and stepped forward to lift the quilt, only to find that there were pillows under it. The target has escaped, Amabu reported in a low voice. Chase, this is an instruction from General Ross on the other end of the walkie-talkie. The elite soldiers immediately followed a trail and chased downstairs, and soon found a young man with curly hair, wearing a red coat and carrying a school bag, running away to the end of the alley. As if knowing the consequences of his own anger, the direction of the curly-haired youth's escape happened to be a closed and unmanned factory. At the same time, in the command vehicle, Kyle suddenly got up from his seat as if he couldn't sit still. and reached out to open the door directly. General Ross looked at him in surprise. "Mr. Kyle, you are, it's coming out." Kyle only said this sentence calmly, and stepped out of the carriage, his tall body hidden in the night. Chapter 241 The Second Battle on Earth, the Strongest versus the Strongest. The alleys near the factories. The curly-haired youth, the target of the elite soldiers, that is, Dr. Bruce Banner, is running around desperately to escape. Drip drip. Bruce frowned because of the heat caused by strenuous exercise, and his face was full of panic. The watch displaying the heart rate on his left wrist began to emit a warning sound, and the value on it had increased from more than 100 to exclamation mark. "Don't come out, don't come out, just be patient," Bruce muttered, gasping for breath, his right hand firmly pressing on his chest, his inner heart beating powerfully, like a monster roaring angrily. Under his soliloquy, the monster faintly restrained himself in persuasion. But at this moment, two soldiers suddenly rushed out of the alley in front of him, blocking his way. "Stop. Don't move." As soon as Bruce's expression changed, he turned around and was about to walk back, but the sound of footsteps and figures followed one after another, and the road behind him was blocked by more soldiers in a blink of an eye. "Raise your hands. Squat down. You have nowhere to escape." Amabu walked out from the rear line, pointed a gun at Bruce, and said in a cold voice, "Don't force me. If this continues, it will come out." Bruce raised his hands helplessly, and said with horror on his face. Facing the situation with no way out, his heart pulse watch started beeping again, and the value on it had quietly jumped over 200. "What's coming out?" Amabu frowned, didn't think too much, and subconsciously pulled the trigger to prevent accidents. The bullet from the paralyzing gun accurately hit Bruce's neck, and Bruce rolled his eyelids. He passed out due to nerve paralysis, and fell straight forward on the floor of the dark alley. Only the Zinmei watch was still emitting a warning sound, and no one noticed that the value on it was close to the critical point of dot. "The target has been knocked down. Take it back now," Amabu reported to the walkie-talkie and waved his hands forward. The two teammates behind him immediately put away their guns and rushed forward with tools like handcuffs. Crack. The two soldiers cooperated to lock back the wrist of Bruce, who was unconscious on the ground. Until then, almost all soldiers felt that the task had been completed. Just when they breathed a sigh of relief, a terrifying mutation happened suddenly. With a muffled sound and the screams piercing the night sky, the two soldiers suddenly flew upside down in the darkness of the alley, flung more than 10 meters in the air, and smashed hard on the pillar behind Amabu. A strand of cold sweat fell from his forehead, and Amabu turned his head to look, only to see the comrades who were performing the mission together just now. At this time, the corpses are like two meatloafs stacked together, obviously dead and unable to die again. He looked into the alley again. In the darkness, where Bruce was unconscious, there was a huge monster standing on two limbs. "Shoot me," Amabu calmly shouted, aimed at the huge figure and pulled the trigger, and the rest of his teammates followed suit. All of a sudden, the densely packed paralysis gun bullets intertwined and landed on the monsters in the alley, but all of them bounced back without exception, and scattered all over the ground like rubber bullets. Roar! The monster let out a roar like thunder, and its huge feet stepped down. The bullets of the paralyzing gun on the ground were crushed, and finally revealed its true colors under the illumination of the street lamps. My God! Amabu took a breath, and there was no doubt that what appeared in front of him was a monster. A pair of faint green eyes, tall and somewhat bloated giant, wearing a pair of big black pants, rough skin all over the body is ugly green, the whole body is full of swollen muscles and blue veins. No one will doubt the terrifying power contained in it. It was grinning and roaring angrily, as if it was born for battle, and its breath was thick and violent, far surpassing any creature. "General Ross. There's a green monster, what is it?" Amabu asked calmly. "That's the goal for tonight, Hulk." In the combat headset, General Ross's sigh responded when he learned of the appearance of the Hulk. He knew that the battle of the elite soldiers had failed. Hulk. Before Amabu had time to think too much, the Hulk in front of him had already rushed forward, and the ground he stepped on was trembling, posing a threat of death far surpassing that of a rhinoceros. "Quick retreat," Amabu yelled, turned around and ran back. The teammate next to him reacted a little later, and was caught by the Hulk with his bare hands. Amabu had never seen any battle scenes before, but it was the first time in his life that he encountered such a monster. He had just rushed 10 meters away when there was a whistling sound of breaking wind behind him. He looked back, But it was the Hulk who was angry and threw his teammate's body as a weapon. Amabu didn't have time to dodge, so he had to stretch out his hand to block it, but the force was transmitted to his shoulders, and there was no room for him to unload the force, and his own body was thrown flying in an instant. Amabu rolled on the ground several times in a row, broke an unknown number of ribs, and finally hit the wall in a bloody mess. This is the Hulk. The power at will is measured in tons, and ordinary people are as weak as ants in front of it, vulnerable to a single blow. Roar! The Hulk roared angrily a few times, and took a few steps forward, approaching Amabu, who fell to the ground and twitched. It's not bad to die at the hands of such a powerful creature, Amabu grinned far-fetchedly, and closed his eyes in resignation. But after a few seconds, he didn't die, so he opened his eyes in surprise. The Hulk stopped beside him, the shadow of his huge body covered him, but his eyes didn't even look at him, he just raised his head towards the night sky, and another emotion appeared on the face of the always angry monster. Curious, stunned, wild, tyrannical, cold, and high fighting spirit above the night sky. Kyle was suspended in the low air, his silver hair was disheveled by the night wind, his golden pupils were burning like flames, and his dark wings padded to form small hurricane-white waves. Kyle looked at the Hulk, and the Hulk looked at Kyle, and the two stared at each other like this, and there was no room for the rest of the weak creatures. The auras of the two are pulling each other. It turned out to be you, the Hulk made a low and hoarse voice. If Bruce Banner is still conscious, even he will feel unimaginably surprised that the transformation state that can only be angry and wreak havoc will one day speak out. Come here, Kyle smiled lightly, patted his wings down, and turned into a black shadow and flew towards the nearby factory at high speed. The Hulk grinned grinningly, squatted down slightly, and jumped forward vigorously like this. It exploded with astonishing jumping power, jumped tens of meters without assistance, crossed alleys and alleys, and fell straight to the open space of the factory where Kyle arrived. When it landed on the open ground, the concrete floor cracked and opened unbearably. The Hulk looked at Kyle, who was 10 meters away, and roared angrily, losing his mind again, as if the sobriety he spoke just now was just an illusion. Bring it on. Kyle took a deep breath, clenched his hands, and the venom covered his body with a biological coat with a loud bang, turning into a dark monster whose appearance and appearance are not inferior to the Hulk. In this battle, there is no technology, no spells, only biological physiques that have mutated to the limit. This is the top confrontation between strength and strength, speed and physique in the history of the Earth. Just like the Cretaceous Spinosaurus versus Tyrannosaurus Rex, but they are fundamentally different, because before that, both of them were ordinary humans. Chapter 242 Invincible Hulk. Under the dark night, in the open space next to the factory, Kyle, covered in venom, has long and narrow eyes that are scarlet, and every muscle of his tall body is stretched out like a swell. There are lightning and flame-like lines on his body surface, like a dark monster from hell. Bruce, the incarnation of the Hulk, has beast-like oily green eyes, dense muscle fibers appear rougher and stronger, and the blue veins on the body are protruding with strength and anger, just like a billions of prehistoric green-skinned giants. The two are completely different from the previous human appearance. Regardless of their appearance or personality, they are completely biased towards inhuman wildness. Their existence itself is divorced from natural aesthetics. The body containing terrifying power seems to be born purely for fighting. Very good prey, Venom laughed wildly in Kyle's mind. Driven by his high emotions, Kyle grinned happily, no longer suppressed his desire to fight, clenched his dark fists loudly, and raised his left fist provocatively upwards towards the Hulk. Roar! The Hulk roared angrily, stomping the sole of his left foot on the ground fiercely. The concrete floor instantly shattered inch by inch like a spider's web. Its slightly bloated body is as fast as a giant shell under the amazing jumping power. With the dust rising from the tail, the Hulk was approaching in front of Kyle in an instant. He didn't have fancy fighting skills, but simply arched his right hand back, with his strong and huge shoulders in front, using his whole body to fight with brute force. Hit hard. The Hulk's shoulder ram. Obviously there is no energy fluctuation, but under the high-speed movement of the body, the air wave still explodes in an exaggerated manner. This blow, even if the high-speed rail plane hits head-on, it will also be destroyed on the spot. Even a skyscraper will collapse on the spot. Kyle's eyes widened suddenly, and he wanted to catch it with a punch, but his combat experience prompted him to temporarily switch from offense to defense. His hands in the dark and tough coat quickly crossed each other to block in front of him, acting as a physical shield, and his left foot pushed back against a concrete floor. Then, with a muffled sound, the two touched each other at zero distance. Kyle's long and narrow pupils shrank suddenly, feeling that what landed on his hands and arms was not a shoulder blow from a creature, but a meteorite falling from the sky to the surface. To be honest, he regretted the moment he really got close to the Hulk. The Hulk stopped at the spot where Kyle was standing, with his right shoulder pushed upwards, and waves of gravel and dust were set off a few meters away. Kyle, who was in the center bearing all the strength, was knocked out very simply. Boom, boom, boom. Kyle's dark body rolled and flew upside down in the air. First, he smashed through the steel gate of the factory behind him, and couldn't stop smashing through the mechanical equipment inside the factory. The body exploded and flew out. The entire huge beverage factory seemed to be cut open in the middle by a giant armor-piercing bullet, and the paths affected along the way were turned into ruins, causing many circuits and equipment to be disorderly and partially ignited. Careless, Kyle shook his head helplessly, shook his hands that were recovering quickly, and stood up from the shallow pit in a little embarrassment. But he was sent flying 50 meters away in a face-to-face. Whether he dares to dodge the attack has always been his habitual thinking. After drawing the Protoss gene card, Kyle's physique is equivalent to the fusion of a super soldier and a Protoss. His physique alone is stronger and stronger than the average Protoss, and he can use 10 tons of strength perfectly. Coupled with a full coverage increase of mature venom, his strength has reached nearly 15 tons. Physical defense is also relatively strong and invincible. But the Hulk, just pure physical strength, is hundreds of tons. That's right, hundreds of tons of power. The moment Kyle got close to him just now, he naturally checked the cards on the Hulk gene, the Hulk's gene rare purple ability card. Due to the large amount of gamma radiation, the body undergoes extreme mutations, and whenever the heart beats faster when the emotion is excited, it will become a Hulk burning with anger. The Hulk possesses superhuman strength, stamina, and superb regenerative abilities. The more angry, the stronger, with a potential of 100 tons of power. The skin of the whole body can resist attacks such as physics, cold weapons, bullet shooting and bomb explosions, immunity to diseases and poisons, and immunity to extremely high temperatures. Abnormally developed leg muscles can jump, span long distances, run fast, and even create shock waves by flapping their palms. The secreted glands can expand the lungs, and can breathe and move quickly underwater at various depths. Warning: the body and consciousness are usually controlled by the transformed Hulk. Current status: cannot be drawn. There is already an ability card with a rare purple prefix. If it's just based on combat power, the Hulk is really the perfect gene. Kyle sighed secretly. Even he was envious of the Hulk's superhuman physique. Although the Protoss genes are equally powerful, they were completely defeated by the Hulk physically. Of course, the lifespan and divine power potential of the Protoss are not comparable to the Hulk. More importantly, the Hulk gene will split a Hulk personality from the original body, gradually dominating the consciousness of the body. That is to say, the Hulk gene has gone to a certain evolutionary extreme, so strong that it is on the verge of self-destruction and destruction. Because it has always retained its human personality, it is able to be in its current state of balance. Before Kyle could think too much, the ground trembled slightly again. He raised his head quickly, and in the night sky in front of him, the Hulk was suddenly falling to the side. I can't resist. As soon as Kyle thought about it, he reacted quickly and rolled on the spot. Just after this evasive action, the Hulk fell and stepped on the original pit. The ground trembled accordingly, and countless gravel and dust splashed up. Whip! Claw! The person was still rolling on the ground. Kyle glanced at the nearby Hulk out of the corner of his eye, and quickly bounced out a long black whip with his swinging left hand. The whip wrapped around the thick neck of the Hulk, pulling his body towards the Hulk behind. At the same time, Kyle clenched his fist tightly with his right hand, and the fist end stretched out 3 dark claws, tearing up the dust in airwaves and piercing towards the back of the Hulk's neck. Roar! The Hulk roared, touched back with his big hand, stained with dark green blood, and turned angrily to catch Kyle. Stepping on the back of the Hulk's head, avoiding the big green hand, Kyle took advantage of the momentum to bounce, turned into a dark black figure and shot towards the factory. The swift blow of the dark claws only pierced the Hulk's basic skin. How can it be hit head-on? Kyle gritted his teeth, and faced the problem of fighting against a god of war Kratos in the duel field on Star Sokol last time, the state of full coverage of venom, facing the perverted enemy with rough skin and thick flesh, with only a long whip, claws, and the blade mode is not enough. What's more, What's more, it's the Hulk now, and even the thousands of tentacles, Kyle is not sure that he can seriously injure it. Let me think about it carefully. How to fight. Kyle was extremely fast, nimbly submerging into the factory. Hulk angrily followed closely behind, ignoring all the fence walls along the way and crashing into the air. Chapter 243 Venom, New Form. Inside the closed production factory. It was late at night, and the workers all went home to sleep. Thanks to this, they were able to escape the impact of tonight's fighting. In the huge assembly line production field, it is divided into 3 floors with iron shelves. Some instruments were smashed by Kyle just now, and there are flickering fire and black smoke. Tap tap tat. The ground of the factory was trembling slightly. The dark green giant rushed in, its oily green eyes scanned the surroundings, as if looking for someone in every corner. Call out. A shallow black shadow passed by the left side at high speed. The Hulk grabbed the iron frame, broke it into pieces and threw it over. The iron frame wiped the black shadow and fell into the air, hitting the glass frame behind, and there was a sound of broken glass cracking sound. The black shadow disappeared again, quietly blending into the shadow of the night. Roar, the Hulk growled impatiently. Seeing a gas tank in front of him, he stepped forward and supported the bottom of the front end with both hands. It was a giant cylindrical gas tank with a length of 7 meters and a radius of 2 meters. It contained more than 10 tons of items as a tool pull-out. With a push of the Hulk's palms, the giant gas tank flew out, roaring and rolling on the ground, and the countless crowded equipment bunkers in the small half area of the field were swept away. Call out. A black shadow seemed to be forced out of it, flickering in the shadow. The Hulk's senses were so keen, he let out a low growl, and immediately ran and sprinted into the shadow. Under the approach of its body, the black long whips and the shadows twisted and intertwined, against a faint dark light, but they were faintly woven into a half-formed net through the iron pillars and beams inside the factory. After the Hulk walked into the trap, its head touched the ceiling of the 3rd floor, and then a flash of scarlet and coquettish pupils flashed. Close the net. Kyle was originally standing on the ceiling in a handstand. At this time, he suddenly stepped on the ground and jumped down. He pulled the long whip downward with both hands, and pulled the net that had been woven with the long whip to shrink. The Hulk roared, and the tough dark whip wrapped around its hands, waist, and neck, and it was tightly strangled with strength. Kyle didn't try to subdue the Hulk with a long whip. As long as he briefly restricted his body movements, he could bring the battle back to his control. Try this trick. He licked his lower lip with his scarlet tongue, and a strong air wave exploded under his feet. He pulled the long whip with both hands for strength, and at the same time, he burst forward with the help of a mid-air sprint. Following the forward trend of his body, he kicked his knee hard on the face of the Hulk. This knee strike perfectly combined the 3 leverages to maximize the strength of the body. Kyle's face changed slightly. His knees seemed to hit the vibrating metal far beyond steel. The Hulk's body remained motionless, his head just tilted to the left. Green blood flowed from his nose. His head was a little dizzy under the huge impact. But that's all. It's all skin trauma, which is not enough to win back the winning ticket from the Hulk, but makes it even more angry and violent. The Hulk stared at Kyle, who was nearby. His dark green pupils were burning with anger, and under the force of his thick hands, the tough long whip began to gradually break. Kyle didn't have the slightest fear, took the opportunity to quickly retract his knees. His left hand was still restrained by the long whip, and his raised right hand had turned into a sharp blade, slashing towards the Hulk's forehead swiftly and powerfully. The light of the knife flickered, and the blade touched the Hulk's eyebrows, cutting a slightly deep wound, and the disgusting green blood flowed down. Roar! The Hulk roared angrily. All the bound whips were completely broken, and the hands that had regained freedom of movement raised, and Kyle was sent flying with one punch. Boom! Accompanied by a dull sound, Kyle arched his back and hit the gas tank. The steel shell of the giant gas tank was dented inward, twisted and almost broken in two. Master, we seem to be no match for it. Venom's bitter laughter sounded in his mind, and his voice was completely no longer confident. Stop talking nonsense, and find a way for me quickly. Kyle took a breath of air, and was embedded in the air tank in a big-shaped straddle. 2 ribs were slightly broken in the chest. Heal quickly again. But he healed himself, and the wounds on the Hulk were also gradually healing. The moves in the full coverage state of Venom are almost used up, and if they can no longer be effective, they can only rely on the divine body to run the power of Vulcan to fight. Delay time, I still have a move, Venom replied quickly. No one noticed that on the ground beside the Hulk, The black liquid formed from the shattered whip suddenly moved consciously. The black liquid slid up the Hulk's feet, sinking into it at the last second of healing from the wound on his neck. "That's what you said." Kyle rested his hands on the shell of the gas tank and stretched out the twisted steel, but before he could stand up, a huge shadow enveloped his body. Raising his head slightly, Kyle's eyes met the Hulk in front of him, who was grinning and growling angrily at him, stretching out a big bare foot. Boom! Kyle's body was like a black ball, flying out at a high speed obliquely, knocking over the iron frame on the second and third floors, and rushing straight through the ceiling of the factory building. The person was in the air, with wings stretched out from behind. Kyle stopped in mid-air like a brake, and the venom liquid on his body rained down. "Venom, how long did you say it would take to delay?" "I'm really going to lose my temper," Kyle said in a deep voice. The divine body, which has not been awakened and cannot use divine power, is still too passive in the hands of the extremely angry Hulk. More. Before Venom finished speaking, Kyle's pupils shrank, but the roof of the factory below suddenly crashed, and the Hulk rushed straight towards him, who was floating in the air like a rocket. Kyle just wanted to flap his wings to avoid, but the Hulk's speed was too fast, and just reacted. His left hand had already grabbed one of his feet. "It's over," such an idea came to Kyle's mind. He was held by the Hulk's ankle, and he couldn't break free for a while. He could only be pulled by it, and he fell freely to the factory below. The wind whistled by his side, and in his field of vision, the distance between his body and the factory below kept getting closer. Under the dangerous oppression, Kyle's eyes flashed with golden flames, causing the venom mask on his face to melt away like frost. Just before Kyle couldn't help taking back the venom and unleashing his divine power, an excited prompt from the venom suddenly sounded in his mind. "It's done." As if following its words, a little viscous black liquid emerged from the Hulk's body and returned to the venom itself on Kyle's body to make up for the ablated venom mask. Kyle was taken aback for a moment, and slowly clenched the 5 fingers of his left hand into a fist. The black shell of the entire arm began to swell and become firm, and soon formed a giant fist that looked like a hammer. The strength of the whole body is mobilized and controlled accordingly, and the increase is condensed on the left fist and the hammer. The moment Kyle was about to touch the ground, he subconsciously threw a punch and bombarded the strong chest of the nearby Hulk. The power that has been stored is like a flood that breaks a dam, venting out heartily. Next moment, the Hulk let go of his palm in pain, and his entire huge body was raised high, as if hit by a high-speed suspension train. He fell hard and rolled on the ground, plowing a 30-meter-long scar in the back. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 244, Hulk with a Violent Hammer. PFFT. The dark wind slammed back, forming 2 small hurricanes immediately, and the strong winds disrupted the glass bottles inside the factory. The falling tall body abruptly stopped its tendency to touch the ground, and stopped at a low altitude of half a meter from the factory in a thrilling manner. With fluttering wings, Kyle remained suspended in the air, looking at the Hulk, who was blown 30 meters away with a random blow. Half of his body was still planted in the pit, and his eyes subconsciously turned to his deformed left hand. The fist can no longer be simply called a fist, it is more like a huge armored hammer. Layers of dark cuticles are wound and polished, like a bone form that is out of the scope of the coat. Kyle didn't ask Venom, because the moment Venom's new form appeared, he understood what Venom had just done just now. Venom borrows the body part that left the main body, manipulates and lurks into the body of the Hulk, learns the natural ability of the Hulk during the battle, and feeds back to the main body. This ability is today's new armed form, which can be called Heavy Punch or Heavy Hammer. Kyle can clearly feel that the mechanical power of his body is automatically gathered at the end of the left fist hammer at all times, and stored for blessing and overlapping. Without any skills, relying on superhuman physique to hide a powerful punch, this is the fighting method that the Hulk is best at, and it is also the perfect armed form to control the body's strength. After Kyle realized this, his scarlet eyes looked at the Hulk coquettishly, his slender tongue licked his lower lip, and the desire to fight burned like a flame again. Roar! With a low growl like an ancient beast, the Hulk rolled and stood up. All the bricks and equipment that were pressing on it flew away, and the green-skinned monster's body ignited with trembling anger. Boom! It smashed the ground with one foot and jumped out, with its huge body rampaging, sprinting along the path of scars plowed by its own body. It's just in time. Kyle took a deep breath, and instead of retreating, he moved forward, flapping his wings back, like a boost from a rocket, and quickly swept towards the approaching Hulk. Just like sparks colliding with the earth, a battle of needlepoints against weapons, one green and one black figure will meet head-on. The Hulk roared angrily, facing forward like a pile driver. His monster-level body structure cooperated with force, and blasted out his clenched right fist with 5 fingers. Kyle's pupils flickered. He didn't dodge or block. He raised the hammer that had been stored in his left hand for a long time, and hit the big guy in front of him violently. The moment the green fist and the black hammer collided, the entire space in the factory seemed to be at a standstill, and all sounds disappeared into dead silence. Then, center on both. Buzz, the turbulent white air wave swayed wildly, and the local air pressure exploded inch by inch. The gravel was shattered into powder as soon as it flew up, and the sound waves swept around like waves. It was obviously just a pure physical and strength confrontation, but it was like the detonation and shocking scene of 2 hot weapons and missiles. The hammer in his left hand was pressed against the Hulk's fist. Kyle gritted his teeth. His wings were beating wildly, and his body retreated about half a meter before he could barely stabilize. No matter how angry the Hulk shouted, gritted his teeth, and exerted force like a balloon in his right hand, he still couldn't completely repel Kyle. In other words, Kyle in the hammer fighting form is still slightly inferior to the strength of the Hulk, but he still received the Hulk's full punch head-on. A punch approaching 100 tons of force. It was a good kick just now, didn't it? Kyle whispered coldly, looking at Hulk's eyes full of anger. While keeping against his fist, he slowly stretched out his other hand. Under the puzzled eyes of the Hulk, the black shell on the right hand was rapidly condensing and expanding, and soon transformed into a hammer shape exactly like the left hand, carrying a heavy and extremely threatening aura. Now it's my turn. As soon as Kyle finished speaking, the hammer in his right hand was raised high, and fell at a slightly skewed angle, simply violently blasting on the Hulk's head. Clang. Similar to an iron stake hitting a metal bell. The Hulk's head was still 100 times harder than steel, and under the blow of the heavy hammer filled with strength, his eyes were still rolling, his ears were ringing, and he was dizzy for a while, and his huge green body couldn't stop flying backwards. Its body rubbed against the ground and rolled continuously, from one end of the factory to the other end of the factory. Like Kyle before, it cut the whole factory in half from the middle. In the astonishing monster-level battle, the manufacturing factory that had already been riddled with holes finally couldn't bear the shaking of the earthquake, and the building structure fell apart and collapsed. At this time, in the alley next to the factory, General Ross arrived with his soldiers to deal with the dead bodies of the 2 soldiers, and ordered the medical staff to give first aid to Emib, who was seriously injured and dying. At this moment, General Ross and the soldiers raised their heads and looked sideways, their pupils constricted in shock at the same time, and saw that the huge manufacturing factory collapsed rapidly under the night, and it became an empty ruin in a few seconds. "What's the current situation at the factory?" General Ross asked calmly into the walkie-talkie. He has previously dispatched elite soldiers to conduct long-range tracking and investigation of the Hulk. Report to the general. A soldier lying on the roof of a building outside the factory, holding a night vision binoculars to investigate, was full of shock, and hesitantly reported to the walkie-talkie, "The target Hulk is being suppressed by that dark creature." The Hulk was suppressed. General Ross opened his mouth wide. From his father's mouth since he was a child, he heard some things during World War II, and at this time Kyle disappeared, so the identity of the dark creature fighting the Hulk in the factory is self-evident. What General Ross didn't expect was that Kyle was so powerful that he could suppress the helpless Hulk to the disadvantage. In the battle situation of the factory ruins, as the investigators said, Kyle has the absolute upper hand at this time. No, it should be said that he is hammering the Hulk. Hoo-hoo. Accompanied by the strong and unwilling roar of the monster, the Hulk was once again sent flying by the slamming hammer, and his body presented a wonderful falling parabola in the air. Call out. A black figure flitted across the night sky slightly slowly, chasing the Hulk, who was still flying backwards in the air at half the speed. Hulk opened his hands angrily, trying to grab the black shadow. But the wings padded slightly, and Kyle dodged flexibly and flew above the head of the Hulk. In the hammer form with slightly bulky hands, Kyle's agility has indeed been greatly reduced, but with the help of flying wings, Kyle's speed is still a notch higher than that of the Hulk. Kyle grinned slightly, swung the dark hammer in both hands, bowed left and right, and hit the Hulk, who had nowhere to rely on the hammer, and smashed it down little by little. The Hulk, full of anger, couldn't use his strength, and the heavy hammer hit the green-skinned muscles like missiles. It was so depressed that it wanted to vomit blood. Chapter 245: The Escaped Hulk. The dark wings trembled slightly. Kyle spun around in the air, and slammed the double hammers on the Hulk. The double hammer finalized. The Hulk had no room to resist, and fell stiffly from a height of more than 10 meters, hitting the ground with its head on the side of the factory that had long been in ruins. Puff! Like a small piece of extraterrestrial meteorite falling to the ground, under the powerful impact force, the sky was full of gravel and dust, smashing out a 3-meter radius earth pit. Panting heavily, Kyle flew down to the edge of the pit, raised the hammer in his left hand and stepped forward, about to continue the offensive while the iron was hot. Roar! The strength of the Hulk's skin and flesh is obviously no worse than Superman's strength. After being injured by so many hammers, he stood up without losing his combat strength, and jumped out of the pit. Continue. Kyle licked his lips. With a hammer in front, his body tensed, and he entered a full-scale fighting state. But after the Hulk rushed out of the pit, he roared extremely unwillingly at him, turned around without hesitation, and jumped tens of meters away with heavy pedals. His figure escaped into the wilderness night in the opposite direction. When it came out like this, its back seemed to be running away, and Kyle was a little dumbfounded when he saw it. Hulk escaped. It shouldn't be. Even if the Hulk is facing an enemy 10 times or 100 times stronger than himself, he will turn into a reckless man in anger, and he will do it whenever he sees him, without knowing what fear and escape are. By the way, the current Hulk personality is not strong enough. It should be that Bruce's human personality has begun to reverse. It will turn back to human. Kyle's mind was running extremely fast, and he quickly thought of this, knowing that now is the best time to arrest the Hulk. He was about to chase the Hulk that was gradually going away, but just as the wings on his back opened, his movement stopped suddenly. Kyle's pupils contracted, the heavy hammer shape of his hands began to fade away, and it was difficult to maintain the full coverage of the venom on his body, and the black liquid began to melt and tick down like water. "Sorry, Master," Venom said weakly, and the symbiote transformed into the casual clothes mode that consumed the least. "Master," Weesee's deformed metal necklace flickered, and explained, "Just now you were in a symbiotic state with Venom, and after maintaining the fighting form with two-handed heavy hammers, your physical strength has been violently consumed, and now you are almost overdrawn to the limit gun." "I see," Kyle gasped. His face was a little pale, and sweat dripped from his body like rain. After leaving the full coverage state, Kyle turned directly from a full peak state to deficit, like draining his energy. The high-spirited battle and the soaring adrenaline just now affected his judgment of his own body. It wasn't until he stopped completely and his tense body relaxed that he realized how bad his current situation was. Tired, mentally and physically exhausted, every punch in the heavy hammer state must mobilize and superimpose the strength of the whole body to the limit, so that all the muscles in the whole body are tired and sore. Hungry and extremely hungry, the divine body desperately needs food support instinctively. The self-healing factors and body cells seem to be screaming loudly, longing for sufficient nutritional supply. Sleepy. His eyelids were heavy like lead, and his consciousness was so weak that he was about to fall asleep. He wished he could just lie on the ground and have a good night's sleep. As before, the side effects of using thousands of tentacles, but this time the situation is even more serious. Due to the first use of the heavy hammer, the hands were deformed and used to continue high-load combat. "I'm actually a little carried away," Kyle sighed, and could only raise his head slightly, watching the Hulk disappear into the distant night. The military vehicle stopped at the field command center. General Ross was back in the car, receiving intelligence messages from scouting soldiers everywhere, but 5 minutes ago, the battle situation in the ruins of the factory fell silent, and there was not much information sent back. Just when he put down the earphones, a soldier's voice suddenly came from outside the car. "General, Mr. Kyle is back." "What?" General Ross was taken aback. He quickly opened the car door and went out by himself. Sure enough, he saw Kyle walking here with a sleepy face surrounded by several armed soldiers. "Mr. Kyle, are you alright?" General Ross didn't ask about Hulk's situation immediately, and said with a concerned greeting, "I'm fine. The Hulk ran to the wilderness, and he should be back to his human body now. You can send soldiers to track it down," Kyle replied slowly, weakly. General Ross didn't think too much. and directly sent orders to the surrounding soldiers, ordering them to drive and chase. After a few armed soldiers left, Kyle entered the car and sat on the car seat tiredly. General Ross looked at him worriedly. Mr. Kyle, I think you are very weak now. Do you need to see a doctor? No need. Kyle shook his head and said softly, I just want to eat now. Eat? General Ross was stunned for a moment, but immediately ordered the soldiers to bring over the canned food and compressed biscuits that had been spared from going out. Looking at the big and small cans in front of him, Kyle was not picky about food. He picked up a can and opened it with a fingernail. The spoon stuffed a large piece of meat into his mouth and devoured it. After a few minutes, General Ross lowered his head, looked at the empty cans beside the car, swallowed his saliva, and calmly said to the intercom, Bring me more food, serving 10 people. It wasn't until after eating a meal for 30 people that Kyle put down his spoon that he finally stopped eating, but his stomach didn't look swollen at all. Mr. Kyle, do you want to eat? General Ross stepped forward and asked cautiously. No, I'm a little full. Kyle let out a sigh, and the hunger in his stomach was gone. General Ross had a bitter face. A little full? You ate it alone, 1/3 of the food supply brought in this mission. I'm going to sleep, don't disturb me if you have nothing to do. As soon as Kyle finished speaking, before General Ross responded, he closed his eyes and fell into deep sleep in half a second, leaning the back of his head on the seat and sleeping soundly. General Ross blinked and said with emotion, The symbol of peace is really a god. The night passed. After dawn, the ruins of the former factory site, with many shocking battle traces on it, shocked the local residents, and there were rumors of a battle between gods and demons last night. The armed soldiers tracked him down in the middle of the night. And General Ross finally received an important piece of intelligence information. Bruce Banner completely disappeared when he arrived at the port off the coast of Brazil, and he probably left Brazil on a ship. Bruce left Brazil. Where will he go? General Ross didn't think too much about it, and soon got the answer in his mind, and made a relative decision-making order. All soldiers return to the fighter plane, and we return to base. The target person must have gone to the direction of the United States. Chapter 246 Restarting the Super Soldier Project. The United States, the military's second base. The large transport fighter plane slowly landed at the airport, and the military ambulance that had been notified was already waiting by the side. After the deck of the cabin was lowered and opened, the medical staff quickly swarmed up and carried the seriously injured and unconscious Amobu on the medical flat stand to leave. General Ross came to the edge of the deck, greeted the officers at the base who came to pick up the plane, and turned back to the armed soldiers in the cabin, urging, Isn't that okay? As soon as the words were finished, an armed soldier flew a few meters from the cabin hall in a parabolic trajectory with a dull bone-cracking sound, and fell heavily on the steel floor. General, we really can't do it, the armed soldier responded coughing blood, and was picked up by the medical staff at the base, and was taken away in a state of embarrassment while lying on the medical flat rack. But Kyle was still sleeping in the military vehicle. The armed soldiers wanted to move him out of the vehicle, but just before the door was opened, Kyle's subconscious instinctively prompted him to raise his hand and make a simple gesture to drive away the fly's action. You know, today's Kyle is only weaker than the Hulk. His casual slap, at least, contains a ton of impact. How can an ordinary person's body be able to bear it? Therefore, the several armed soldiers who accompanied this mission did not fall into the hands of the Hulk, but finally fell into the hands of the sleeping Kyle. General Ross looked at the military vehicles parked in the cabin hall, momentarily at a loss as to what to do. This is a symbol of peace, so it can't be left on a fighter plane or a military vehicle, right? Just when General Ross was worried, a beautiful black figure, stepping on high heels, approached the fighter plane from the airport outside. Most of the soldiers passing by seemed to be in a daze, and they didn't intend to stop them. Some soldiers wanted to step forward to stop them, but soon they stopped under the obstruction of the air wall. General Ross looked surprised. Looking at the Oriental beauty in a professional suit, he was amazed. At the same time, he was keenly aware of the vague sense of danger on her body, and asked solemnly, You are the Carl family, people from the unnatural office? Yutong smiled slightly, handed out a black gold business card that looked like a card, and pointed to the military vehicle where Kyle was with her slender and white fingers. I'm here to pick up our patriarch, California, outside the visa checkpoint. After a series of thrilling disguises, Bruce Banner, with his ragged and old jacket and a pair of loose trousers on his lower body, with messy hair and a peaked cap, finally stood on the land of his long-lost hometown. The pursuit order of the military that escaped was 4 years old. If it wasn't for this surprise attack by the military that forced him to return home by mistake, I am afraid that he would never return to this country for the rest of his life. Bruce lowered the brim of his hat. His vicissitudes of face were hidden in the shadows, carefully avoiding the noisy crowd, walking on the street like a homeless man. He walked aimlessly for a while, then raised his head in surprise, only to realize that he subconsciously came to the main entrance of a university. Culver University. Here is where Bruce's fate turns. 4 years ago. From here, he fell from the pinnacle of his life with a double harvest of career and love to the boundless trough of monsters and criminals who escaped from accidents. Birds are singing and flowers are fragrant at the gate of the university. The fountain is shining golden in the sun. Young boys and girls are playing on the lawn, and the aisles are full of formally dressed students and teachers coming and going. Fearing being recognized by acquaintances, Bruce hid in the shade of the aisle. As if played by God, a plump female teacher with long hair just happened to come out from the main entrance of the school, holding a man in a suit and leather shoes affectionately with both hands, passing by the aisle talking and laughing. That was his former girlfriend, Eliza Taylor, the daughter of General Ross. Bruce sighed inwardly, and was about to turn around and leave when a gust of wind blew, and a promotional poster fell on his hand. Unnatural Firm 6 unheard of characters came into view. Bruce frowned slightly, and moved his eyes down to read, "Do you wake up with physical strength beyond ordinary people? Have you ever been bitten by an animal and got the racial talent corresponding to the animal? Have you experienced unstoppable mutations in your body due to accidental changes in radiation, and awakened superpowers that you can't control even yourself? The Supernatural Firm specializes in dealing with unnatural events, and is willing to solve your problems, Mr. and Madam. For details, please call the hotline 0001. What kind of company is this? After reading the above introduction, Bruce opened his eyes wide in surprise. This company was established just for people like him. But 4 years ago, let alone its existence, I had never even heard of the name of this company. Is that a lie? Bruce whispered, flipped back casually. His eyes widened again in shock, but behind the office's promotional posters, there were numerous authoritative certifications. The United Nations Association, the U.S. Military, the U.S. CIA, the Homeland Strategy Bureau. Is this still a private company? What's the origin? Bruce choked, swallowed his saliva, and stared blankly for a while. What happened during his absence in the United States? New York, military second base, medical emergency room. When the military doctor heard footsteps approaching, he turned around and saw that it was General Ross, and hurriedly stood up to salute. General Ross, how is Emma-boo? General Ross looked solemn, looking through the glass window of the emergency room at the naked man lying on the instrument on the big table with infusion tubes all over his body. I'm still in a severe coma, with multiple comminuted fractures all over my body. Even if I can wake up, I won't be in a vegetable state, and I can only spend the rest of my life in a wheelchair. The military doctor didn't hide anything, and shook his head regretfully. General Ross was silent for a moment when he heard the words, and then said out loud after making a decision, "Give him a look at the potion and try it." That potion. The military doctor was stunned for a moment, but quickly understood, and said with incredible hesitation, "But if it fails, Emma-boo probably won't wake up forever." "Try it," General Ross said in a deep voice. "A man with such a strong desire to win and pride like him wakes up and finds himself permanently disabled. He probably wants to commit suicide. It's better to give him a chance now." "Okay, I understand. I'm going to prepare now." The military doctor nodded and hurriedly ran to the medicine storage room. "It's all up to you. I'll give you a chance to get close to that man," General Ross muttered to himself while looking at the unconscious Emma-boo. Many years ago, he single-handedly promoted and restarted the Super Soldier program during World War II. Today, the Super Soldier serum has been produced, but the strong repellency still cannot be popularized among soldiers, and it is still in the clinical trial stage. If Emma-boo can usher in a transformation from a disparate situation and become a new generation of super soldiers, maybe he is also a hero born in the army, slightly touching the power field of a symbol of peace. Since General Ross saw Kyle suppress the Hulk in Brazil, this idea has become stronger. Chapter 247 Untouchable Domain. After a day. California, Culver University, Laboratory Building. Bruce, in casual clothes, sat in front of a computer in the laboratory, communicating with a scientist who studied gamma radiation through chat software. He glanced at the female teacher next to him from time to time, with an unspeakable bitterness hanging from the corner of his mouth. Bruce hesitated again and again yesterday, but in the end, due to inner defense, he didn't contact the unnatural agency, and wanted to solve the Hulk transformation symptoms of his body by himself. In the end, maybe God had mercy on him and let him reunite with his girlfriend last night. Banner, is that friend of yours reliable? Eliza asked nervously with her hands on Bruce's shoulders. Seeing Bruce last night, she almost went crazy with joy. Now she doesn't want to leave him for a moment, and she is even more afraid of losing him again. Reliable. I have been secretly contacting him in Brazil. He specializes in the study of gamma radiation, and he is the only one who understands the current situation of my body, Bruce said, took a deep breath, and said a little excitedly, I sent him a little body serum last time, and now he sent me a message saying that he is a little sure that he can eliminate the gamma radiation in his body. I hope it works, said Eliza expectantly. Boom boom boom. Suddenly, there was a chaotic sound outside the window of the building. Eliza stood up hastily and looked out of the window. On the green lawn as soft as a blanket, armored vehicles loaded with armed soldiers rolled in one after another, and surrounded the periphery of the experimental building with battle surging from all directions. In the rear of the army, led by her father, General Ross. Banna. Eliza looked back worriedly. Bruce got up from his seat, shrugged and said, Eliza, get out of here immediately. But, Eliza wanted to say something, but Bruce interrupted her and said with a wry smile, don't worry, it's hard for me to die even if I want to. After half a minute. When he saw Eliza running out of the building, General Ross no longer hesitated, and coldly issued instructions to the soldiers. Smoke bomb, force it out, roger that. The two soldiers immediately stepped forward with the guns and fired smoke bombs at the building. Within a few seconds, the interior of the experimental building was shrouded in thick smoke. While everyone was watching nervously, a huge shadow suddenly appeared in the white smoke inside the floor-to-ceiling glass of the experimental building. Roar! With a low roar of the monster, the floor-to-ceiling windows exploded from the inside to the outside, and the Hulk, who was only wearing a pair of big pants, jumped angrily from the third floor to the lawn outside. All soldiers, attack me! General Ross waved his hand, at the same time. New York, Emgren Building, the office and lounge on the top floor. After sleeping for an unknown amount of time, Kyle frowned slightly, and his brain gradually woke up from the daze. Before he opened his eyes, he felt that he was lying on a soft bed, but the pillow was not only soft, but also had a suitable warmth and fragrance. Boss, are you awake? When the woman called softly, Kyle's eyes widened, and what came into view was the Twin Peaks wrapped in the shirt, and a beautiful face. Oh, it turned out to be Yutong's knee pillow. Kyle yawned slightly, got up from the bed, stepped on the cold floor with bare feet, looked at the luxurious bedroom and the city scenery outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, and probably knew what happened next. How long have I slept? Kyle stretched his waist, looking at the bright sunlight coming in from the window, and asked curiously. It should be about a day and a half. Yutong got off the bed like a secretary, and tidied up the quilt and pillows on the bed, and smoothed her slightly wrinkled stockings and suit skirt along the way. What's going on with Ross? Kyle asked, looking for slippers. Yutong tapped his finger, and a cabinet opened automatically, and a pair of slippers flew out and fell to the ground in front of him. On the table next to the bed, Weiss, transformed into a mobile phone, replied, I just sent a message half an hour ago, saying that I have found Bruce's whereabouts. It is in Culver University. It is time to send troops to encircle and suppress him, then don't worry. Kyle walked to the bathroom wearing slippers, waved his hand at Yutong and said, let's prepare lunch and go there after lunch, okay? Yutong smiled slightly the other side. Culver University, on the lawn of the experimental building. Under the impact of dense shells, half of the grassland had been burned into burning soil. Several thick and armored vehicles in front had collapsed and flattened into steel sheets, and the shell casings and fragments were scattered all over the ground. The Hulk, who was at the center of the battle, ignored the bullets falling on his body, and angrily wreaked havoc on military vehicles. Armed soldiers who were touched by him fell to the ground with serious injuries. Amadou, it's your turn to play. Facing this situation, General Ross shouted suddenly. Under his call, in the eyes of all the soldiers, Amadou in military uniform is like a savior, striding forward confidently. His physique is obviously much taller, close to 1.9 meters, with a hulking back and a muscular arm carrying a hand cannon and firearms. Amabu completed the genetic transformation in the super soldier potion. Not only did he heal from his injuries, but he also clearly felt that his body was more than 5 times stronger in all aspects. Peace symbol, I have finally caught up. Amabu's eyes flickered. He was very confident, feeling that he was invincible. Now, I will kill the Hulk first, and use this battle to achieve my heroic name. Amabu was roaring in his heart, and one person went up to meet him fiercely, picked up the pistol and gun, and aimed a cannonball at the Hulk's chest. Roar! The Hulk roared angrily, raised his arms, and blocked the powerful artillery fire. Amabu took advantage of the momentum and moved forward step by step. The hand cannon fired continuously. The back booster, which was enough to injure an adult's arm in one shot, fired continuously in his hands without ignoring it. The Hulk's body was stiff and covered by artillery fire, which directly set off Amabu's current strength. Seeing this scene, the surrounding soldiers began to cheer. There was a haughty smile on the corner of Amabu's mouth. At this moment, the trigger was pulled and there was a crisp sound, but the blasting bullets of the hand cannon had run out. The Hulk clapped his hands, and the air wave extinguished the flames of the cannonballs. He grinned angrily at him nearby, and launched an offensive with big strides. It's just in time, let you see, my strength now, Amabu sneered, threw away the gun in his hand, and squatted and jumped up with a nerve speed that even athletes could not reach. He punched out his left fist, and with nearly a ton of strength concentrated and blasted out, he went forward to meet the Hulk's fist. Crack! Amabu's smile froze on his face. In an instant, the bones in his left hand shattered like an egg hitting a rock, and his left wrist was broken at, degrees. The Hulk's fist continued to move forward without stopping, landing on his chest. Boom! Amabu's body flew out, rolled more than 10 meters in the air, and hit a big tree straight. Sliding down to the root of the tree, Amabu's eyes widened, his chest collapsed inward and a large fist was formed, and he couldn't stop spitting out blood. If it wasn't for his super soldier physique, he would have died long ago. He stared at the Hulk not far away, like a deflated balloon, his spirit and aura were slumped. Still can't touch that area of peace symbol. Chapter 248. Hurry up and invite the peace symbol. When he became a new type of super soldier, Amabu thought he had crossed the peak and reached the untouchable cloud pyramid. Then, all self-confidence, enthusiasm, fantasies, and longings were all dissipated like a cloud of smoke under Hulk's punch. It doesn't matter if the body is seriously injured, the most important thing is the proud soul. As if someone slapped him hard, his face was swollen from the burning. This is not the script I want. Angry and ashamed, Amabu poured out a gulp of hot blood into his chest and throat, vomited sticky blood, leaned his head on the root of the tree, and fell into coma. It only took about 10 seconds for Amabu to step into the battlefield domineeringly and leave the field with a punch from the Hulk. The scene became very awkward in an instant. Not only the armed soldiers couldn't figure it out, but the company commander, General Ross, also pulled the corners of his mouth far-fetchedly, and his face couldn't hide his frustration. General Ross greatly overestimated the power of the super soldiers, while greatly underestimating the strength of the Hulk and Kyle. Looking at the whole Earth now, I really can't find even half of them who dare to compete with the two by relying solely on their physical strength. Amabu was just a small episode, and the Hulk didn't take it seriously at all. He continued to fight violently with the surrounding armed forces with crushing and terrifying combat power. Looking at the retreating army, the deputy commander backed away in fear, looked at General Ross who remained calm behind him, and said anxiously, "General, if this continues, our entire army may be wiped out. Because of the location of the university, many heavy combat weapons can no longer be used. What should we do now? What else can I do?" General Ross blew his beard, took a deep breath, and said in a firm voice, "Hurry up and ask for the peace symbol." At this time, New York, inside the top floor office of the Regency building. The private dining table was filled with hot food and fine wines, and Yutong leaned on the side to serve him like a unique scenery. Kyle, wearing a napkin, picked up the knife and fork, and was cutting the medium-rare beef on the plate, sending it to his mouth, chewing and savoring the inner gravy. Drip. The smartphone on the table trembled slightly, and then Weese's report sounded. "Master, General Ross has called again. At least wait until the boss has finished his lunch." Yutong raised her eyebrows lightly and said, slightly dissatisfied. Kyle didn't seem to hear what the two said, until he finished eating the whole piece of beef on the plate, picked up the glass and sipped the red wine, then stood up clapping his hands, smacking his lips and said, "It's fine if it's someone else. Well, Ross is the son of the former instructor after all, so we can't make him wait too anxiously." Yutong stepped forward and carefully untied the napkin tied around his neck. "Weiss, are you ready?" Kyle asked calmly. "Of course, everything is ready," Weiss responded quickly. "Then let's go." Kyle shrugged and walked towards the stairs going up, that is, the rooftop on the top of the building. Less than half a minute. An eagle-shaped starfighter floated from the roof of the Emgrand building. The cold metal body shell entered a translucent invisible state, and a row of advanced engines at the rear roared slightly, starting at a Mach speed that surpassed all Earth aircraft. Like a silvery streamer, the starfighter left New York and headed for California at an extremely fast speed. It seems that Jarvis just passed over the Stark Industrial Building, and Jarvis's air defense reconnaissance noticed it, and reminded him through a loudspeaker, "Sir, the master seems to have left New York again. Godfather, he should be busy dealing with that guy named Hulk." Tony wiped the sweat from his forehead, shirtless, burying his head and fiddling with various pipes and instruments. His eyes became serious and firm, and he said, "I can't just admit defeat." In the main hall of the huge industrial building, countless complex acceleration instruments and pipelines are connected together, and the structure for making Krypton gold has basically taken shape. I have to say that Tony is indeed a unique genius engineer on the Earth and even in the universe. Culver University, on the vast grassland reduced to war situation. Boom. The Hulk was as angry as a rhinoceros rushing forward, and the armed soldiers fled in panic. The armored vehicle that stayed in place was knocked into the air and flew out, rolling and throwing 10 meters on the grass. The deputy commander reported almost desperately, "General, I have sent someone to contact, but the peace symbol is still in New York. Even if he flies over at full speed, this university will be destroyed into ruins." "Then delay for me," General Ross said calmly. "Yes," the deputy commander could only respond bitterly, commanding and encouraging the soldiers on the scene. No one noticed that at this moment, several wisps of extinguished white smoke rose in the air hundreds of meters above their heads. An interstellar fighter suspended in mid-air invisible, and the rear cabin was slowly opening downwards, revealing Kyle, who had already been covered in venom inside. The scarlet narrow pupils flickered, like a dark monster looking down indifferently. "Yutong, wait for me here for a while." Kyle made a hoarse and sharp voice, stepped out of the deck and jumped, and fell down facing the strong wind. Yutong smiled and leaned against the edge of the deck, the strong wind blowing her long black hair. "Thornet." The Hulk had just torn a military vehicle in half with his bare hands, and he let out an angry growl. Suddenly, as if he had sensed something, the movements of his whole body stopped abruptly, and he looked up at the sky curiously. In its field of vision, an extremely familiar tall figure, and a dark-hand hammer that is still fresh in its memory, are rapidly zooming in infinitely. When the Hulk wanted to react, it was too late, and Kyle, who was experienced in combat, obviously wouldn't give it this chance. Taking advantage of the momentum that fell from the sky, Kyle swung the heavy hammer in his left hand that was fully charged, and suddenly slammed it down on the Hulk's forehead. This heavy blow was like a critical blow from a god descending to Earth. The Hulk suddenly knelt down on his knees, and the force spread downward, and the invisible shock wave swept around the Earth, and the lawn immediately exploded unbearably. The soil and grass plants, all separated from the ground, shattered and splashed around in the turbulent wind. The soldiers and officers who witnessed this scene had dull eyes and were beyond shocked. Only General Ross, looking at the dark monster rushing to the scene, forcibly whispered calmly, "He's coming," ignoring the armed soldiers around him. Kyle landed on the ground with both feet, violently raised his left fist in the shape of a heavy hammer, and faced a briefly dizzy Hulk in front of him. He had no scruples to smash the hammer. The heavy hammer form will consume stamina violently, so make a quick decision. Kyle is also very understanding, and he doesn't talk too much. He treats the Hulk as a giant sandbag, and hammers it at the brain, which is the only weak point, so that it remains dizzy. All of a sudden, the Hulk rolled left and right on the ground, from the sky to the ground, and was beaten without any resistance. Chapter 249 Pig-like teammates. Boom, boom, boom. Culver University, which had already dispersed the general crowd, had circles of waves on the surface of the artificial lake, and near the area where the experimental building was located, the ground shook as if an earthquake of magnitude 5 or higher had occurred. A large number of armed soldiers and military vehicles retreated to the edge of the lawn. The terrifying battle between the two monsters on the grass may be unforgettable to the soldiers present. The dark demon grinned slightly, pressed the Hulk's head to the ground, and swung the hammer with his left fist violently. Each heavy hammer has a powerful force, containing at least dozens of tons of terrifying impact. The hammer made the Hulk fall to the ground. His brain was buzzing so hard to respond, he could only let out a low growl unwillingly. His green eyes widened angrily. The ground trembled and shook constantly. The grassland where it was located was bare, and the ground had subsided for more than half a meter. Grass clippings and dust were still floating in the air. Kyle grinned ferociously, exhaling hot air from it. His body was rapidly consuming a lot of functions, but his body movements did not relax or pause at all, suppressing the Hulk with a stormy offensive. It is easy to beat the Hulk, but it is much more difficult to kill the Hulk, and it is completely unnecessary. And if you want to subdue and capture the Hulk, other powerful electric shocks, technological cages, etc. are unreliable, so you can only use the oldest method, violent knocking out. The Hulk's resistance is strong, but with enough strength, he will still faint, thus turning back into a human body. I must have enough strength. Is it because I hit the wrong place? Why haven't I fainted yet? Looking at the Hulk, who gritted his teeth and insisted, Kyle swung the heavy hammer in surprise and hit the opponent's chin suddenly, causing it to back against the ground and push the soil like a bulldozer until it was more than 10 meters away. Kyle sprinted to catch up, and continued hammering in another place. A bit of a visual sense of whack-a-mole hammers. Hulk has a splitting headache, flattened hair, and has yet to pass out the edge of the lawn. Eliza looked at the Hulk, who was hammered, and was about to rush forward in grief, but was soon stopped by her father, General Ross himself. The deputy commander took over the army on the spot. Seeing that the Hulk was at a disadvantage, he suddenly thought that this was a good opportunity to assist in the arrest, so he quickly summoned a few armed soldiers and ordered them to show the secret weapon on the general's car. Boom! The heavy blow was like a blast, hammering the Hulk out again. Kyle's strong chest heaved, and he was panting hotly. Although most of his physical strength had been consumed, his scarlet eyes became brighter and brighter. After the Hulk served as a sandbag partner, he became more proficient in the shape of the heavy hammer, and the feeling of exertion became more comfortable and happy. Hulk's head was hammered, and the brief dizziness lasted from less than half a second at the beginning to about 2 or 3 seconds. I can do it. I can stun it and subdue it. I won this battle. Kyle grinned, stepped back on the ground, dragged the heavy hammer in his left hand, and rushed towards the Hulk at a slightly slow speed. The Hulk was lying on the ground, shaking his head from side to side, trying to get up from the ground with difficulty. At this moment, the sound of cars approaching came from the surrounding area. Kyle looked around, and saw that the 2 military vehicles next to him were starting up, and the black cloth on the back cover had been torn off, revealing an instrument similar to a huge loudspeaker, aiming at the Hulk on the grass 10 meters apart. No way. Kyle stopped suddenly, feeling an ominous premonition in his heart. Then, under the order of the deputy commander at the side, the loudspeaker was activated immediately, emitting strong and sharp ultrasonic waves. The sound waves appeared as solid air waves, interlaced and continuously hit the Hulk, who had just stood up. The Hulk gritted his teeth and did not fall down, desperately resisting the 2 waves of ultrasonic waves. On the other side, even though it was not in front of the ultrasonic wave, it retreated more than 10 meters at the first time. In the aftermath of the ultrasonic wave, Kyle, who was fully covered with venom, still fell straight on the grass, covered his ears with injuries, and showed a distorted expression on his face that was more painful than the Hulk. In the brain, the venom was screaming in pain. Even though he is an adult and is far more than 100 times stronger than he was born, venom still has fatal flaws. Extremely afraid of high temperature and sound waves. Immediately, Kyle was forced to disarm the heavy hammer in his left hand, and then his dark coat gradually melted like frost under the sun. Apparently, venom has been unable to maintain a symbiotic state. Seeing this scene, General Ross opened his eyes wide, gritted his teeth and growled, "Who opened the ultrasound? What's the matter?" The deputy commander turned around upon hearing this, scratching his head inexplicably. Facing the baptism of the ultrasonic wave, the Hulk roared angrily, and suddenly picked up 2 shells of military vehicles from the ground. One side served as a shield, and the other side slammed outward. PFFT. Before the deputy commander turned his head, his body was smashed into meat paste by a piece of shell. The steel shell continued to castrate and cut the ultrasonic instrument in the rear in half. The Hulk leaped forward, jumped more than 10 meters amazingly, trampled to pieces the ultrasonic equipment on another military vehicle, and the parts rattled and scattered all over the ground. The Hulk stood on a pile of scrap iron, glanced around, and the armed soldiers retreated out without fighting intentions. It didn't pursue, and its angry and violent eyes fell somewhere 30 meters away. There Kyle has returned to his original human body, got up from the grass, his face was slightly pale, his whole body seemed to be picked up from the water, sweat was dripping from the casual clothes. Don't be afraid of opponents who are like gods, but teammates who are like pigs. This sentence is indeed true. Kyle sighed helplessly, holding the venom card between two fingers, and put it back into the card space. Roar! The Hulk roared angrily, as if a turnaround was coming. He lifted the steel shell in his hands with both hands, and threw it in the direction of Kyle with all his strength. That can't be helped. I can only rely on myself. Kyle shrugged, raised his eyes intently. His golden pupils ignited bright flames, his sweat-wet clothes dried instantly, and hot golden flames began to rise from his body surface. He looked at the flying iron piece, and instead of dodging, he quickly raised his left palm. Within 3 meters of the steel shell, the front end becomes fiery red and hot, and 1 meter further forward, it simply melts into molten iron, which splashes on the grass in front of him with a sizzling sound. How is this going? Outside the lawn, all the onlookers were stunned. This was far more shocking than the Hulk's strange power. Not only that, even tens of meters away, they still felt that the temperature in the air rose sharply, and the temperature suddenly became hot and stuffy against the season. In the early autumn of September, the high temperature is coming. Chapter 250 Vulcan Power. With divine power flowing, Kyle raised his hands, and a little golden flame ignited all over his body. The flames were wrapped in casual clothes, like a thin and luxurious flame windbreaker draped on his body. Under the power of the divine flame, the surviving grass plants within a radius of 5 meters of the grassland where they stood quickly withered at a speed visible to the naked eye, and even the space seemed to be slightly distorted under the high temperature. The heat wave rushed to the surroundings like a tidal wave, forcing the onlookers to sweat profusely and retreat infinitely. This is the first time that Kyle has used his divine body to release the flame of talent in the public eye. The tip of the iceberg of strength finally surfaced, more than half of it. It's Kyle, the symbol of peace. It was really him who the Hulk fought just now. He is probably the only one in the world who can deal with that monster. The armed soldiers were pleasantly surprised, all breathed a sigh of relief, and there were excited discussions. The battle situation seemed to be transformed into a large-scale idle meeting scene. The appearance of the man in front of him is undoubtedly a boost to people, and the reason for this is because he is Kyle, the symbol of peace. Since 70 years ago, he has never lost, and he can turn the tide of battle when he appears. He is an undefeated legend recognized all over the world, and he can be called the first hero of the gods. Roar! The Hulk roared angrily, but no matter who the enemy in front of him was, he jumped off the scrap iron regardless of the heat wave as soon as his brain got hot. It rushed towards Kyle like a flood, and the ground began to shake as it ran. No matter facing any enemy, the Hulk is unarmed, and a pure punch of up to 100 tons can blow everything up. Facing the Hulk approaching in front of him, Kyle took a deep breath, the golden flame spun around his arms, and the accumulated divine flames shrank between his 5 fingers, clenched into fists little by little. Concentrate divine power. Kyle punched forward, but it wasn't a punch, but a flaming column of flames. The Hulk stopped abruptly, raised his thick arms, and blocked the destructive flames. The flame slammed into its strong, muscular green skin, splashing bright flames all over the sky. The heat wave was rolling, and the golden flame reached thousands of degrees, which was enough to scorch the ground, and the grass and soil on the surface melted into hot lava. But the Hulk endured the impact of the flames head-on, and still stood upright in it. The flames rubbed its arms and chest and separated to the 2 sides, unable to truly inflict damage. This physique is really incomprehensible to the point of perversion. Looking at this scene, even Kyle couldn't help complaining secretly. He has no doubt that even if the Hulk is thrown into the crater, it can take a comfortable bath in the bubbling lava. Kyle didn't waste his energy in vain, turned his left hand, and the flames gushing out of his hand stagnated and dissipated. The Hulk let out a low growl, and sprinted forward again, approaching within 3 meters. Since divine power alone can't help you, then try this. Kyle's golden eyes flickered, he licked his dry lips, and quickly pulled out an item card from the card space. When the item card appeared, it turned into an entity. It was a broken metal axe with only the handle and tip left, like a simple shotgun, firmly held by Kyle's right hand. The god of war brought the god-killing weapon, the god of war axe. When Sokka was still a super soldier, even if Kyle used his hands, it was still difficult to shake it away with all his strength. Now his physique has been strengthened 10 times under the Protus gene. This broken artifact axe can be used with one hand, and the weight is just right. Kyle held the god of war broken axe. Since he didn't have an axe blade, he didn't make a chopping movement. Instead, he used the tip directly in front of him, stabbing the Hulk in front of him like a spear. Snapped. The Hulk reacted extremely quickly, clapping his hands close to his chest. In the collision of flames and strong wind, the tip of the axe was clamped by the strong and bloated green palm. Let go of me. Kyle didn't want to compete with the Hulk. The golden and sacred flames on his body were in full bloom, and his body's divine power was continuously poured into the axe. From the surface, the fierce flames are constantly gathering towards the god axe, making the god axe more hot and destructive like charging. The reason why a divine weapon can be called a divine weapon is because it can complement the divine power of the Protus. Ordinary cold weapons, even if they are not melted by the divine flame, will weaken the power of the flame during transmission, but at this time, the divine axe is constantly absorbing the flames of divine power, accumulating superimposed power. The Hulk lowered his body tensely, tightly grasped the tip of the flame-wrapped axe with both hands, roared and moved forward, moving Kyle back 1 meter. See when you can catch it, Kyle sneered, blessing the divine axe with supernatural power without money, which made the temperature of the tip of the axe continue to rise. 1000 degrees Celsius is just the beginning, and it will soon jump to 2000 degrees Celsius, and there is no sign of stopping. Until it reached about, degrees Celsius, the tip of the axe was hot red like fire, and the part held by the Hulk's palm began to sizzle, and a few wisps of green smoke glowed from it, and the heat wave made the fountain 100 meters away start to smoke. Roar! The Hulk roared unwillingly, with pain in his anger, and finally let go of his hands unbearably. The divine axe carried fierce flames, and the tip struck forward on the chest, knocking its huge body into the air. Fortunately, it works. It wasn't until this moment that Kyle breathed a sigh of relief, feeling really confused just now. No matter how high the Hulk's high temperature resistance is, there will always be a limit. Now it seems that the high temperature of, degrees Celsius is enough to hurt it. Of course, degrees Celsius is already the limit temperature that his divine power can reach. The Hulk looked like an unbeatable Ziokiang. He got up from the ground vigorously, pouted to blow on the still hot palm, and there was an obvious burn mark on his chest. An angry and violent breath rose from its body, and its muscles were bursting with blue veins, and it continued to sprint forward unwillingly. This broken axe doesn't do enough damage. Kyle frowned, suddenly remembered something, and his golden pupils shone slightly correct. In addition to the broken axe in his hand, there is also a veritable complete artifact in the card space. I just don't know if that item is considered an offensive artifact. As Kyle thought, with a wave of his left hand, an item card was extracted and materialized. It was a golden fire plate, held by his left palm, and an extremely ordinary flame was burning in the plate. Eternal fire. How to use this thing? Kyle looked at the fire plate in his left hand in amazement, concentrated his divine power, but couldn't control the inner flame, nor could he activate it to release any power. It is like a common flame both externally and internally. Before Kyle's research was thorough, the Hulk approached violently, and his fists roared down as usual. Kyle's pupils contracted. He subconsciously raised the fire plate, flipped the plate 180 degrees, and slammed it on top of the Hulk's head. The inner eternal fire raged down, covering half of the Hulk's body. Roar! It was the first time in Kyle's life that he heard the wail from the Hulk, accompanied by a faint smell of meat floating into his nostrils. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.